The Honourable Member from Tignish, Palmer Road, and the Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Deputy Speaker, and on behalf of the Standing Committee on Legislative Management and yourself as Chair, and as a consequence of the retirement of Mr. Shane Carr as Assistant Sergeant at Arms in 2019, I move, seconded by the Honourable Member from Charlottetown West Royalty, that Miss June Ramsey of Cornwall be appointed as Assistant Sergeant at Arms of the Legislative Assembly, effective immediately. Ms. Ramsey, an RCMP officer for 36 years in Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and PEI, has been employed as a security officer at the Legislative Assembly since May of 2019. On behalf of the Standing Committee of Legislative Management, I congratulate her on her new position. Thank you.
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would just like to say congratulations to June. She's been a great addition to the legislature during our brief time here, and I congratulate her on the promotion. I know she'll serve in the role very responsibly, Mr. Speaker, and do a great job. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to pass on my congratulations to June. She's always a smiling face and a warm person, as you can. Less obvious now that she has a smiling face, but and June was my mother's name, so I have a particular fondness. There are not many Junes around, and she glows as my mother did. So welcome to June, and congratulations on this new position. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too would like to rise and congratulate Joan. And Joan's certainly a pleasure to work with, and I want to thank her and congratulate her for her 36-year distinguished career, and she's certainly a pleasure to work with here. And once again, congratulations, Mr. Speaker.
Is there anyone else that wishes to say a few words? No. I'd like to stand and also congratulate June. And it's a pleasure working with June. She's a friendly face and always got a smile on and always up for a chat. I also would like to thank Shane Carr. Shane Carr was always nice to work with, and he was definitely up for a chat. He loved the chat, and so just a big thank you to Shane, and happy retirement to him and his wife. Matters of privilege and recognition. Oh, sorry. Shall I carry? Carry. Got carried away with myself. Matters of privilege and recognition of guests. The Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to my colleagues in the legislature. Happy Friday to all Islanders, Mr. Speaker. It's going to be a lovely day out there, so get out and enjoy it if we can. I want to begin, Mr. Speaker, by saying hello to all the children in our province. It is, of course, National Child Day, and I will have a ministerial statement after question period with this regard, Mr. Speaker, but I just wanted to say how important it is that we recognize and do everything we can as legislators to give the children of this province the best start in life, to make sure they're supported, and to give them a chance for every success that they can have in the future, Mr. Speaker. So congratulations and hi to all the children of our province. And in speaking, Mr. Speaker, of important starts and assistance in learning, Mr. Speaker, I do want to say a special thanks to all of those island businesses, individuals, non-profits, community groups, teachers, professionals, everyone who's played a role in the implementation of the Hot Healthy School Lunch Program in Prince Edward Island, Mr. Speaker. Government officials have rolled out what I believe has to be called probably the most comprehensive and inclusive school lunch program in the country, Mr. Speaker, using a healthy menu and using local products to feed close to 12,000 island students each day, Mr. Speaker. And I do want to congratulate all of my colleagues in this legislature who have worked toward this end, Mr. Speaker. While many outside of the legislature look in to find the differences, the cracks, the divides in here, Mr. Speaker, there are many. We recognize that, and that's a good thing. We also do a lot of really good things, Mr. Speaker, and one of the things I think we can be proud of, regardless of how long we're all in here, I think the Hot School Healthy Lunch Program is one we all should be proud of in here, Mr. Speaker. So thanks to all my colleagues who helped make that happen. And Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, we were also very fortunate to work with Chloe Costa and the Breakfast Clubs of Canada to expand our school breakfast program across the province, Mr. Speaker. This is a proud moment for all of us, and when our students get a chance to have some food in their belly, Mr. Speaker, they have a better chance to have success with their learning and future success in life, Mr. Speaker. I also want to say, Mr. Speaker, that I guess we all know that effective of 12:01 this morning, masks are now mandatory in public and indoor spaces in Prince Edward Island, Mr. Speaker. It's not a magic bullet to fix everything, Mr. Speaker. We still want all islanders and need all islanders to practice all of the social distancing and the physical distancing and the procedures and protocols that have led us to where we are now, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank all islanders, Mr. Speaker, including the 26 other members of this legislature who have led, Mr. Speaker, in this regard. I think we're in a good place right now because islanders have led, islanders have helped each other, they have cheered for each other, they've supported each other, Mr. Speaker, and I believe we will get through this safely and more quickly, Mr. Speaker, by continuing to work together. So all the best out there. Let's pitch in, let's help everyone, and let's continue to get through this difficult time. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to recognise this as National Child Day, and we've made big steps here in the province just in the last 12 months with the establishment of the first independent Child and Youth Advocate Office. And I'd just like to give a shout out to Marv Bernstein and the staff there at the CYA who are doing a wonderful job of representing our children's concerns and rights. Canada, of course, is a long-time signatory to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. It looks after the rights of children are wide and diverse, from safety and security to being able to have their voices heard. And to have an independent Child and Youth Advocate Office here on the island is a wonderful thing. And we're very grateful for the work that they do. And I love listening to the voices of children. Today is also the Transgender Day of Remembrance, and for those who are in the transgender and gender diverse communities who have been lost to acts of violence. And we were reminded of that as we all walked into the Coles building this morning, and many of us will be present for a ceremony later this afternoon. So there will be, of course, a minister's statement and remarks on that later, but I look forward to the ceremony this afternoon. A friend of mine, Jean McCardle, got lost in Brookvale a little while ago. She was out walking with her dog, and she's an experienced outdoor lady, but the trails there are so numerous and so dense that I guess she just took a wrong turning, and she was saved by a couple of mountain bikers who came by and showed her the way back to the lodge. So I'm glad you're safe, Jean, and thank you to the mountain bikers who did a real great community service there. Yesterday I said happy birthday to my oldest child, Kate, in Montreal. And today I'm going to say happy birthday to my youngest child, Dan, who's in Toronto. His birthday's actually on the weekend, but I want to say happy birthday to you, Dan. I really miss you. Finally, Mr. Speaker, with permission, I'm going to read a tweet that was following the discussion yesterday on housing that was posted on social media. And it goes like this, with permission. With the discussion in the legislature today regarding shelters and homelessness, I sign off social media. This week I have listened to clients tell me things like, in quotations, I won't live until I'm 40, and I'll be dead by Christmas, while they cry on my shoulder. I will go to work tonight and put on a strong face for those who cannot, but know that on the inside I am exhausted. I can no longer listen to the people in power undermine things. People are struggling. I need to focus my energy right now on those clients and try to support them in any way that I can. I'm limited to what I can do, and I feel helpless. The clients feel helpless. I have no energy left to try to explain those feelings to people in positions of power. But tomorrow is a new day. Please remember that while you may not see it, homelessness and pain often are not visible. Trust me when I say it exists. and the resources we have now are simply not enough. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back in the House today as we wrap up our first full week of the fall sitting. I also would like to say hello to all children on Prince Edward Island on this National Day of the Child. Recently, Holland College has recognized 3 very deserving recipients for their annual awards. Vince McKenna, Don Rhea Moore, and Harvey Stewart have received the 13th Annual Distinguished Alumni Awards for their accomplishment and commitment to their chosen professions. These individuals are great examples for our current students in their steadfast commitment to hard work, perseverance, and community. I'd like to congratulate all 3 recipients on their well-deserved awards. Also, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize today, November 20th, as Transgender Awareness Day. Discrimination is never acceptable, and we must work every day to continue raising awareness and seeking to eliminate all forms of discrimination. I will be pleased to attend the flag raising for Transgender Awareness Day later this afternoon. I hope everyone watching and my fellow members enjoy this weekend. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Winslow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to first say thank you to all the honourable members here who've made my first couple days very welcoming and showing me the best guidance possible. Of course, I do want to say hello to all the constituents of District 10, Charlottetown, Winslow, and good morning. Of course, to echo what the Premier mentioned yesterday, as the Island teachers are wrapping up their parent teachers today, we wish them all the best this coming weekend. And as someone who knows me, as many of you may know, I do spend a little bit of time in various Island arenas. I do want to thank, of course, all of the minor hockey associations across PEI. And there's been a few changes, of course, with all the young players coming into the ranks. And I just want to thank, of course, all of the arena staff. And I want to thank all of the COVID liaisons and all of the parent volunteers who help check our kids in when they make it into the arena. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Montague, Kilmuir, and Government Whip.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to welcome everyone watching online. And I wanted to rise today to wish my mom a very happy birthday. She's probably, well, she watches every day, usually texting me, telling me what I should or shouldn't say. Probably cursing me at the moment. I won't give her age away, but I think she was born in '65. Very young, very young. A lot of snow down east the last couple of days, but one thing now that with all the new pavement, record amount of new pavement gone down, the pavement bears off a lot quicker. So I do appreciate that from the Minister of Transportation under the Liberal government. It usually took about 3 days to get the roads bared off. They were that bad down east, but it's really, no, they didn't even plow them really. Now we got the plows 24 hours a day, so I appreciate that. And just a few, after my questions earlier this week on vaccines, a few people on, some kind of pushback on social media, I guess you could say, that, people saying that, the vaccine won't be safe and we can't take the vaccine. But I just want to, and I guess that's certainly free speech and whatnot, but I just want to encourage Islanders that when the vaccine does arrive, that, you should take it, and it'll, if everyone takes it, then we can all return to our normal lives. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Water and Climate Change, the Minister responsible for the status of women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a great honor and privilege to rise today on this Friday morning. Certainly what a week it's been, and I just want to thank all the members in this House for continuing to work hard for Islanders. Certainly I wanted to say a big shout out to the folks in District 9. Hello to all of you. I hope you're all doing well. Also, a congratulations to June on her new role. Certainly the role of Surgeon of Arms is traditionally a male-dominated role, so it's really great to see a woman come into this role, and tremendous congratulations to her as well. And finally, I wanted to say hello to all the children across Prince Edward Island, and hello to Marv Bernstein and the great staff at the Child and Youth Office. I have had the great honor and privilege to sit on the Child and Youth table over the last year, and certainly it has been a tremendous experience for me. It's really solidified for me the importance of ensuring that the voices of children and youth are heard, and I'm so proud of these children and youth for using their voices and making sure they're heard. So keep up the great work, and I look forward to all the wonderful work that you'll continue to do in the future. Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Minister of Education, Lifelong Learning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, it's a pleasure to rise today and welcome all the colleagues here on this wonderful Friday, but also welcome everyone watching from District 18 Rustico Emerald, especially Mr. Speaker on this National Child Day. I wanted to say hello to my children, who of course are at home today, and I think Alex is probably going to join together with his friend Michael Taylor down the road to talk about their plans for their chicken entrepreneur project. They're hoping to sell some eggs in the future, and they got big plans, Mr. Speaker. And my daughter Annika, I'm sure, is going to get together with her friends virtually. They're big art fans, Mr. Speaker, and they often will view a Bob Ross video, if everyone's familiar with him, and they'll do those art projects together when they have time. So, and also, Mr. Speaker, for National Child Day, of course, I hope to be heading out to Stepping Stone EYC, which is one of the newly designated EYCs, this afternoon. As well as I wanted to give a shout out to the PEI Literacy Alliance, Mr. Speaker. The member from Cornwall Meadowbank had mentioned about how great it would be that we need to have multi-year funding. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to say we do have multi-year funding in place. It's already been improved even before the member brought that up, and so they're a great organization, and we look forward to working with them with their multi-year core funding. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Cornwall Meadowbanks.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I apologize to the minister. I must have missed that announcement. I think it was during the debacle over the West Royalty School. So. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And obviously, I was reading the signs as I was coming in here, Mr. Speaker, and I actually took a minute and I was reading the different schools that were presented on those signs. And I think all our members should take a look at them because I think it's important. We're aware of those situations. But National Child Day, obviously anybody that was blessed with children can be pretty proud today to stand up and look at their children and say, you know, this is why we're in this building, is a better future for them. And me being a new grandfather and the Honourable Transportation Minister being a new dad to twins, I think it's pretty important that we all recognize why we're here and the importance that we're here for, and it is their future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, honourable members, not often I get up to say a few words, but I am a proud dad today. It's my son's birthday on National Child Day, and I won't say his age. If I say his age, it's giving my age away. So I'll just keep that quiet. So yes, he does have a driver's license, and also I would like to congratulate the former Speaker, Buck Watts, and his wife Margie, married 55 years today. Yeah. So I knew Buck before his politician days, and I enjoyed working with Buck during his politician's days. So just to him and Margie, I just want to say congratulations and enjoy your anniversary. Statements by members. The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, November 20th, marks the annual Trans Day of Remembrance, a day where we remember, where we memorialize those who have died as a result of transphobia. It is a day to reflect on the contributions of our transgender community and the power of their survival. Today is also United Nations World Children's Day, a beautiful intersectionality of days where we can look at how we support the healthy development of children and how we encourage them to be their unique selves in every way, every day. As I was writing this statement, I was thinking back to my recent days as a school counselor. Some children that I worked with who knew that their physical body did not match their identity. From a very young age, these children face incredible adversity. Often, instead of allowing a young person to explore their identity, to become comfortable and aware of who they are, many have tried to force them into a mold or role that is foreign to them. This has resulted in confusion, despair, depression, and suicidal ideation, and this is devastating. Something as simple as having a gender-neutral washroom is literally a lifesaver because it normalizes the most basic of things. Trans rights are humans' rights, and the ask here is quite simple. Access to health care based on the informed consent model. The informed consent model is crucial as it removes the need for transgender individuals to prove continually that they are transgender enough in order to access health care. Can you imagine having to prove that you were female enough to get a mammogram? What progress have we made as a province towards implementing trans health care PEI in the last year? How many more times do they need to hear, "I can't help you"? How much longer will trans people have to wait to be able to begin living their lives as their true selves? Why is the only current option to access timely health care to move away? There are limited professionals to help in this area, and as a result, there remain many hoops and barriers to accessing appropriate care. Making the need even more dire is the recent closure of Clinic 554 in New Brunswick. People are losing hope. There can be no more delays in implementing proper transgender health care services in this province. This Trans Day of Remembrance lets vow as members of this Legislative Assembly to continue to engage with people in our transgender community on PEI and advocate for the basic human rights they so justly deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. If you drive down the Wharf Road at 9 Mile Creek in District 17, you arrive at a pretty typical island harbour. Lobster and mussel boats, crews busily working away on the deck and on wharfs, barns and sheds. In amongst all of this activity and people is a newly renovated building, a big building with an eye-catching sign on the side of a large lobster overlaid with the words, Bait Masters. This building is the home of an exciting new island startup business conceived and propelled forward by two fishers and entrepreneurs, Mark Provost and Wally McPhee. Bait for lobster and crab traps, which is traditionally herring and mackerel, has become increasingly scarce and expensive. And that alarming story is a topic for another day. But the need for an immediate, reliable, sustainable, and affordable solution is what drove Mark and Wally to start experimenting with non-traditional bait. After many years of trial and error, they arrived at a recipe that studies show fishes just as well as traditional bait, with the added advantage of using far less fish and it lasts longer in the traps. With lobster landings continuing to provide the bulk of island fishers' income and an uncertain future for the traditional baits, the potential for this business is enormous. Sadly, they have not received the sorts of government support that I would have expected for such an initiative. It ticks so many of the boxes that we love to tout in this room as model economic development. It's small scale, but it's eminently expandable. It uses local ingredients. It supports one of our core industries. It's rural. It has huge export potential. It's sustainable, tremendous year-round employment opportunities. Yet despite all that, they've struggled to get the support. Indeed, I think it's safe to say that if it weren't for the perseverance and the unshakable belief that Wally and Mark possess, this initiative would never have got where it is today. I wish Wally and Mark and their new partner, Pam Skirman Montgomery, all success. And I also wish that our government would be more ready and willing to embrace innovative and visionary island entrepreneurs like this impressive trio who clearly represent the future of our island economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Morel, Donna, and the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I might have to beg your indulgence and perhaps your forgiveness for my statement today. Our many volunteers are the backbones of our community. Often they volunteer and serve for years and even decades, giving generously to their communities. So I think it's right that we recognize the accomplishments and significant milestones when our volunteers reach them. Recently, one of those milestones was reached by someone in this very chamber, someone that I now consider one of my closest friends. 39 years ago, the Surrey Fire Department welcomed a 19-year-old volunteer firefighter, our Speaker. He was new to the fire department, but he was no stranger to firefighting. The Speaker's father, Basil, was the fire chief, and his grandfather, Edmund, had also been chief. This made you, Mr. Speaker, the third generation of Levees to serve the people of Surrey as firefighters. Then, of course, in 2003, Our Speaker became the third generation of Levees to serve as Surrey Fire Chief. And, excuse me. That length of service comes with many nights of heartbreak, Mr. Speaker. I know for you and your fellow volunteers. I know that this takes an incredible toll on yourself and your colleagues, and we are so thankful for that. In firefighting as in life, our Speaker also looked to the horizon and overcame any obstacle that came his way. It has made him the person he is today. During his time as Chief, the Speaker worked very hard to keep morale high in the department, not unlike his role here in the chamber. He was vigilant to make sure all firefighters had access to training and updated equipment, including new trucks, breathing apparatus, boats for water rescue, machines for off-road rescues, and the new pager system, just to name a few. So recently, after 39 years of service as a firefighter, 17 of them as chief, our Speaker retired from the Surrey Fire Department. He was honored by the town of Surrey recently for his many years of service, and on behalf of this entire House, I want to congratulate you, Mr. Speaker, for 39 years of dedicated service to the people of PEI and to Surrey. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cheers for the Bruins.
No, I had no idea that was coming. I'm very humbled, though, and I appreciate that statement. I really do. And yeah, let's leave it at that. And, we'll probably have an easier question period. Thank you, member. Appreciate that. Question period by members, starting with response to questions taken as notice. For our first question, I'll call upon the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I love you, by the way, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that. Last week, after the questions I asked on rural internet in this House, the Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture spoke publicly about changes to Xplornet's work to bring high-speed internet to underserved parts of Prince Edward Island. With respect to the speeds that Xplornet will be delivering, The Guardian cited 3 different government responses: 25 down, 10 up by the spring, 50 down, 3 up, and then 110 by 2023. A question to the Minister. Could you clarify what exactly Xplornet will be providing islanders with, and has the company agreement with government been renegotiated to reflect that?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Member. So what was said last week is that Xplornet has changed their plan. So instead of going fibre first, they're going fibre last. They're going into wireless this spring, which is supposed to be into about 17,000 households approximately. That speed at the time is going to be 53. Now, what I said in the interview, I believed it was 2510, but I said I need to verify that. It's all recorded, which is great to have everything recorded, and you're more than welcome to go out to my comms person, and she'll show you the recording that was said.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the answer, and I hope if the agreement has been indeed renegotiated that you will table the document in the House here, Minister. Xplornet's commitment to government as part of this $74 million agreement is to deliver service with download speeds of up to 50, perhaps, megabytes per second. And up to, of course, describes a range from 0 up to 50. And from all the reports that I've heard, the service that islanders actually receive is very rarely at the top end of that scale and often gets throttled back to make it unusable. A question to the Minister. How will you ensure that the services delivered to rural islanders are at the top of that range?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Honourable Member, that's why it took so long to sign these contracts, is we want to make sure these large companies, big and small, that are held accountable. That contract, in essence, is still the same contract that it always was. What we've done, we've gone back actually from questions that come from opposition that wanted to see this sped up. And that's what we did. We said, what can you do to help speed up internet to some of these rural islanders right now? And that's when they decided, we'll go wireless first, we'll put in fiber next, because the infrastructure, the time and the cost, it takes time to do this. So this was a way for ExploreNet to speed that process up, but the plan is still the same, and it's rolling out as we speak.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. And, part of me is happy that ExploreNet is going to do the wireless first, because that's what they do, that's what they know, that's what they're known for. As far as I'm aware, they've never installed a fiber network anywhere. So I'm not quite sure why government would have gone ahead with a contract with a company who's never actually done that before. But that's beside the point. I'm glad that they're going to go with wireless first. The CRTC objective is that Canadians will have 50 megabytes down and 10 up as a minimum speed, not an up to, but a minimum speed by 2021. In other words, it should not be up to 50-10, but at least 50-10. A question to the Minister. What assurance can you give rural islanders that this deal with ExploreNet will actually meet the CRT standards of a minimum speed of 50 megabytes down and 10 up?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and that is certainly in the service delivery agreement that was signed. And Honourable Member, I met with you, I believe, on at least 6 occasions. I got your input with the opposition, the third party as well. I presented the contracts, open, transparent. None of that was discussed before. But what I can tell you right now is nothing has changed other than they're doing it backwards. They're going with the wireless first, going with the fiber secondly. We're doing that to make sure we can get as many people hooked up to high-speed internet as quick as we can here in Prince Edward Island.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Peers Alliance reached out to me late summer and asked me to confirm with the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning that indeed he was going ahead with his commitment to have gender-neutral washrooms for the 2020-2021 school year, and he said he was indeed committed. Question to the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning: what conversations did you have about this, and what did the rollout of this policy look like?
The Honourable Minister of Education, Lifelong Learning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Member Across, for contacting me in the summer and to make sure that this was happening. So I immediately, of course, reached out to the education authorities and said, this is something we need to do. This makes perfect sense, common sense, as well as the Member Across said in her statement. This is extremely important for the mental well-being of students that need to use gender-neutral washrooms. And so I said, you need to do this as soon as possible. So I'll admit, Mr. Speaker, that when I got the numbers back and I found that really we have about over two-thirds of schools that have gender-neutral washrooms and some that do not, I was a little disappointed. And I had a conversation and I said, look, this has to happen as soon as possible. This is very, very important. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to remind the Minister the education authorities don't have the answers on, they're not the experts in this area, so a consultation with the transgender community, with different organizations that represent them would be a really good starting point. Just this morning, a student shared a story with our office. Her good friend is trans, and every time they need to go to the washroom, their friend group makes sure that the bathroom is empty and then stands outside the washroom making a physical wall to protect their friend from bullying and needing to out herself every time they use the washroom. Not all students have such an amazing group of friends, but they still deserve to go to school without being afraid. These young girls saw the need and took action. Our government could take a lesson from them. Question to the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning. There is a need for true gender-neutral washrooms. Who will you consult, and when will you take action?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, of course, we already have taken action to make sure we get those gender-neutral washrooms in as soon as possible. But the member makes a great point, and I will commit here today to reach out to the transgender community through the various organizations that exist, including the Peer Alliance, and meet with them to make sure that whatever plan we have in place meets their specifications. And I just want to make clear, Mr. Speaker, that speaking with the Premier and the Minister responsible for the status of women as well, these really our priorities, and we have a ways to go in the Department of Education, Lifelong Learning, and we're improving that. And for example, for our SAS system, where we send out information to students, I just learned the other day that we're addressing it to sons and daughters, which of course probably isn't acceptable, so we're going to change that as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that. Something as simple as language is massive, and so I appreciate that. Many of our island schools do not have standalone private washrooms. This is potentially a huge problem as we consider non-binary people, as they are potentially outing themselves every time we go to the washroom under the current way we do things. Question to the same minister, how will you get around this challenge? How will you make sure children feel safe using the washrooms at school?
The Honourable Minister of Education, Lifelong Learning.
Well, Mr. Speaker, first off, I'm not going to gloss over and say that this won't be a challenge, because I think it will be a challenge, and I think the member's recommendation to consult with the transgender community is a great starting point to make sure we're doing this the best way possible, that we're going to be successful with it. And so we're going to move forward. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, is we have just absolutely fantastic experts in our school systems. In particular in this area, I think student services would be the ones engaged, and I know that they will have some excellent advice to make sure this is rolled out properly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside, South Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I keep hearing about the Minister's Sustainable Communities Initiative and how it's going to help our communities. I only hear it from government side of the House, mind you, but it started as an energy initiative after returning from SAMSO. I later tuned into a live stream the Minister did to explain it, and I left confused as to what it actually is. Question to the Minister, what kind of projects are under development through this program?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure you are confused by it. What we talked about, it was never an energy project. It was never meant to be an energy project. It was about making communities sustainable. And by sustainability, it would be whatever the community chose to make themselves sustainable. It could be an energy project, it could be a heating project, it could be internet if that's what they want. It could be any number of projects that that community thought they could use in their community, they could profit from in their community, they could benefit from in their community, and then in turn use the proceeds of that to help build their community, make their community better, whether it be put money into their church, or put money into their ball field, or put money into buying a fire truck, or whatever it was the community was struggling to do to help continue to exist. That was the whole concept behind it. The sustainability part really only had a little bit to do with energy. It had everything to do with empowering communities so they continue to grow well in the future, well beyond us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside, Wilmot.
South Drive.
First, Summerside, South Drive, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I can understand why I'd be confused, Minister, because on your website it says it's an energy initiative and mentions nothing about what you've got listed out there. When an applicant is considering a project and wondering about feasibility, it's essential to know what kind of support to expect. I don't recall seeing a budget for this program, only that it's being cost-shared with the Federal Low Carbon Economy Fund. What is the amount you have budgeted for this initiative, and what is the level of support applicants can expect? Is it 50%, 33%, less, more?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy.
Well, there's this magic money faucet, Mr. Speaker, and we're going to tap into that, as the Honourable Leader of the Opposition spoke about last week. To be honest, Mr. Speaker, there's all kinds of ways to fund projects, depending on what comes forward. We could turn to the help of ACOA, we could turn to the help of infrastructure, we could turn to the help of the Energy Corporation, we could turn to the minister responsible for communities, we could turn to any number of ministers for programs to help, depending on what comes forward. We may turn to Minister O'Regan from Enercan if it's a high-end energy project. So there's no limit to what we're able to do. We went to Ottawa prior to the pandemic. It was about this time last year or shortly after. Met with a number of ministers. There's a lot of interest in what we're doing. There's a lot of interest in helping us achieve what our goals are. So it's not easy to answer what budget item it is, because we could fund this any number of ways. What I would encourage communities to do, like many already have, come forward with their plan. We have a couple of really good ones that we're looking for funding for now. I won't speak for them. We'll wait to see what the federal government does with their response to what we put forward. But I would say if you have something you want to put it on paper, bring it to us, and we'll start helping your community find funds, whether it be from the provincial government, federal government, or any number of sources to accomplish this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside South Drive.
Magic money. That seems to be a theme with this minister here. We'll just keep spending money as it comes, yeah? I've spoken with applicants that have been waiting to get an answer from the program. What is the turnaround time from when you get an application from a community champion to offering them an answer on eligibility?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure who you spoke to because we spoke to all the applicants, so I feel like that may be made up, but that's okay. We have an open call. It remains open all the time. Communities can respond at any time. We don't have an end date on this, so anytime a community wants to come forward, their application will review. They'll be called right away. We'll start talking about what it is they're trying to do, what it is that we're trying to do, and trying to make sure that we can meet together. Not that long ago, I met with a gentleman who has a fantastic plan. And we're looking at formalizing that. We're looking at now helping bring that to more of a formal application that we can take forward and look for funding for through both the COA and other federal sources like the Infrastructure Fund. So I would suggest that anybody who has put something forward has spoke to us, and anybody who wants to put something forward in the future will hear from us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I don't know, telling me I'm making things up in this House, Minister, I don't believe that's very appropriate. I have the email that I could forward to you with the proposal that you haven't responded. It's been 6 months, Minister, 6 months that you haven't given a response. I've heard the Minister say that in order to allow for these projects, he will rewrite the Renewable Energy Act and the Electric Power Act. He advised potential submissions to ignore the existing legislation and dream big. A laudable statement, but some projects will require much different changes than others. Question to the Minister, who picks the winners who get legislation changed to suit their needs and versus who gets ignored?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the honourable member over there is currently trying to change legislation to suit the company that he owns, and I wonder, is he trying to pick a winner or create himself a winner through his seat in this legislature? We keep talking to the federal government. We've gone to Ottawa a number of times to talk about our plans, whether it's our sustainable communities, whether it's our pathway to net zero, or any number of green issues that we're putting forward here in this province. They're amazed with the work we're doing. They're also amazed that the Green Party, Prince Edward Island, is against it all. They can't understand how a Green Party would be against all these wonderful initiatives that are being brought forward by the PC Party, Prince Edward Island. They're proud of the work we're doing. They're proud of the partnership we have with them. They just wonder where you guys are. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside South Drive.
Oh, sorry.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So there's been an ongoing bus shortage in this province over the last few years. I've received emails from Stratford area schools late in the day notifying parents that a second run has to pick up kids from the school in order to take them home because their bus cannot actually run. This all results in students missing instructional time at school, parents left in the lurch, not knowing day to day when their kids are heading off to school or getting home. However, this government's been trying to alleviate this shortage. It's obviously not working. Question to the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning. What else are you going to do to recruit school bus drivers so our kids can get to and from school on time?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the member across does point out a real problem that we've been working on. And I feel like we are making progress, Mr. Speaker. And you know, the education authorities in particular are responsible for this file, and they've been getting very creative, Mr. Speaker. In particular, during COVID, the training of bus drivers was an issue because the number in a cohort was actually reduced, so we couldn't get as many bus drivers trained at the same time. And so I believe in particular the PSB has a creative solution where they're going to start training bus drivers internally, Mr. Speaker, and that's one way, just one creative solution they're using to address this issue as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it'd be good to know the time frame on that because it was reported earlier this week from the French Language School Board that kids are traveling up to 3 hours a day to get to and from school. That is not appropriate. I have kids in Stratford, Mr. Speaker, who are traveling up to an hour to get to École François Biot. From Stratford, that's 9 kilometers away from the school, and it's almost an hour away. Question to the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning. What are you doing to provide more bus runs within the French language school board, French language school system to cut this travel time for students?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Well, and Mr. Speaker, once again, this is a problem that has been around for many, many years, in particular in the French Language School Board, and it's something that, I mean, the previous administration really struggled with, but I'm happy to say that we have a joint committee that's been working over the last number of months and negotiating and working very closely with the French Language School Board to come up with a solution. And I said this the other day in an interview, Mr. Speaker, with the media, that we're going to take immediate action to make sure that we address this for the students that are on the bus the longest. And that means, Mr. Speaker, if we have to send a taxi to take them from point A to point B so they can cut the time on the bus in half, we're going to do that, and we're going to do it right away. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, one of the barriers to hiring more school bus drivers is the requirement for grade 12 education. Many people who could be driving school buses that are quite capable of driving them don't qualify because of this reason. We've read through the regulations. We don't see any reference as to why that's required. So a question to the Minister, why do school bus drivers need to have grade 12 education, and will he remove this requirement so we can get more drivers?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so over a year ago now, this was a requirement that was a little puzzling to me as well, Mr. Speaker. And so I really did a dig deep. A deep dive, I should say. A dig deep? Deep dive. A deep dive, and I read, of course, I read the regulation, understood it, and I really went into the education authorities, and I said, what is going on here? Because it seems to make sense we should be able to honor those with experience as opposed to having that grade 12. And Mr. Speaker, when you get right down to the nitty-gritty, we really need to work closely with unions and with the rules that are involved and collective agreements to make sure we do this properly. And I was told that this is not an area we can move on. It's an area that I'm still pursuing, but as of yet, I have to report that you still do need your grade 12 in order to drive a bus full-time. Substitutes do not need their grade 12.
The Honourable Member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year on November 20th, I asked in this House what this government would do to support trans islanders if Clinic 554 in New Brunswick closed. Since then, shamefully, the New Brunswick government has failed to support this essential clinic, and they have had to close their doors. Question to the Minister of Health. What is this minister doing to ensure that trans islanders will not fall through the cracks and will get the health care services that they need here in Prince Edward Island?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for that question. And it is unfortunate that Clinic 554 had to close. I know the federal government at one point had made a commitment that they would do anything that they could to keep it open, but unfortunately, Dr. Edgar did have to close his practice. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Health and Wellness, along with Health PEI, has a committee working closely with Peers Alliance and the PEI Transgender Network. And I would like to sincerely thank the Peers Alliance and PEI Transgender Network for the tremendous work that they do in our community with trans individuals, but also working with us to better understand what services that we need to incorporate here on PEI to support these individuals. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today my question is to the Minister of Health. Minister, recently we Islanders learned on CBC that the long-term care expansion at Le Chenou in Wellington has been unable to open. The reason for not being able to open is due to lack of nursing, an issue we are hearing across the province in a variety of different facilities. The community spent nearly a decade working and lobbying for this, and when they finished their recent edition, the community was come together for fundraising for equipment to get this long-term care facility up and running, only to learn they could not find staff. Minister, I'd like to thank you for meetings and coming up in the past, but in light of this revelation, what is the Minister doing and his department to help the Chenou find nurses for their residents so they can open?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you, Honourable Member, for this very important question. And I know I've been in continual contact with the management of the facility and with the mayor of the community as well. I've toured the facility. It's a beautiful facility, and it's a shame that it still sits empty to this day. In order to get appropriate staffing and the licensing in place, I had instructed our team at Recruitment and Retention to work very closely with this private long-term care facility to search out, seek out, and find the appropriate staff. Typically, a private care facility is responsible for their own recruitment, but we are standing side by side, working hard to get the appropriate staff in place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the facility requires 5 nurses to be able to open. So far, only 1 has been hired. This is yet another example of the situation we're in today. These private and cooperative nursing homes need assistance to compete with government nursing positions, which often provide higher salaries. Government cannot leave private facilities suffering without necessary assistance. And Mr. Speaker, I know we can't go and travel around the country because of the COVID regulations, but you know, back in the early 2000s, when the oil patch needed a bunch of workers, they came here and did job fairs and got a lot of people to go out west. I know that's hard to do, but why couldn't we do some recruiting by Zoom or some other form, or maybe come up with some wage subsidies to help them recruit some nurses to this facility? Could the Minister please have a look at that? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yes, I think we should be doing that. And Mr. Speaker, we are doing that. Mr. Speaker, through the immigration stream as well, we're very serious about bringing in qualified people to be new Islanders, new Canadians. And Mr. Speaker, through our Bridge RN program, we have a great program where we have internationally educated nurses. Last year was the first cohort. I believe there was 13 individuals went through that program, 12 of which are currently working here on PEI, 1's on maternity leave. Mr. Speaker, the second cohort just started a few months ago, 14. Mr. Speaker, that's another stream where we can bring people in. The other area we're looking at is how we can bring French-speaking nurses in from foreign countries such as France or African countries that their first language is French. But Mr. Speaker, we also need to work with the college to ensure that their English proficiency is up to par as well. So we're doing everything that we can. Again, as I said, it's a shame, it's a disgrace that those beds are sitting empty, and we're going to work hard alongside this private care facility to get it open. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from O'Leary-Inverness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in my riding of O'Leary-Inverness, it is not easy to get access to the flu vaccine. There are 2 pharmacies in O'Leary and 1 public health clinic where vaccine should be available, Mr. Speaker. Yet, constituents are telling me they couldn't access flu shots when they want them. By times, there is no flu vaccines available in O'Leary, Mr. Speaker. Hard to imagine, because they'd run out of supply. Mr. Speaker, this is a great concern to Islanders. Can the Minister of Health update the House on how many flu vaccines were ordered on PEI, and if any pharmacies or public health clinics have run out of flu vaccines for the common flu in any other districts or communities?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, as I stated earlier in this Legislative Assembly, I believe it was upwards of 80,000 doses of the flu vaccine were ordered. Mr. Speaker, it's being coordinated through public health nursing as well as our Chief Public Health Office. If there are shortages in areas, we're working closely with the Pharmacy Association because there may be another pharmacy down the road that has access inventory. So we're continually asking the pharmacies to work together as well to coordinate movement of the vaccine so that we can ensure that every Islander that is seeking a flu vaccine receives a flu vaccine. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from O'Leary-Inverness.
Just doing some quick basic math on that comment, 80,000 vaccines ordered. I thought there was about 160,000 people in PEI, Mr. Speaker. We've had many months to prepare for this flu season. We've been urging Islanders, government stands up and said we want to make sure everybody gets a flu vaccine. Yet you didn't even order enough to get for all islanders, Mr. Speaker. Frankly, it's quite unacceptable and was not adequately prepared for a predictable increase in demand because of the COVID issue. People are more in tune with these types of issues. The Minister can't seem to get anything right in his health delivery, Mr. Speaker. My question to the Minister of Health, if this government cannot deliver the flu vaccine efficiently, how can Islanders have any confidence at all that they're going to be able to roll out a COVID-19 vaccine?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, when I stated that number, what I'm referring to is the first order that would come into the province, Mr. Speaker. There's a specific shelf life for any vaccine, and so we can't have a vaccine sitting in a shelf or sitting in a refrigeration unit that their best before date expires. So, Mr. Speaker, we're working with the Pharmacy Association, we're working through Public Health, and we're working with the Chief Public Health Office to ensure that any Islander that wants a vaccine will receive a vaccine. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from O'Leary-Inverness.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, you should have easily...
Second supplementary.
You should have easily known, Mr. Speaker, that you have a vaccine. You're going to have it roll out over a period of time. There should not be gaps in communities that they cannot access this vaccine. Mr. Speaker, both of our neighbouring provinces have recently had to recall flu vaccines, Mr. Speaker. If we're asking Islanders to get their flu shots this winter, we must ensure that they're actually getting a safe and effective vaccine. We have not heard any announcements in the public from the government about the recall vaccines here in PEI, so I'm going to presume that that hasn't been any of the excuse that they could use to why they don't have vaccines out there, Mr. Speaker. Minister, does Prince Edward Island have any of the same recall vaccine in government stockpile, and if so, what has been done with that?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what I alluded to a few minutes ago was probably why they had to recall some of their vaccines, because they ordered too much in the first batch, and it sat in the shelf or sat in the refrigerator and expired. Mr. Speaker, I have the utmost respect for our healthcare professionals here in PEI and how they work hard, and they're dedicated to ensure that any Islander that requires a vaccine receives a vaccine. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Cornwall Meadowbanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Vaccines seem to be a hot topic these days, but they are important, Mr. Speaker. And I think the arrival of COVID vaccine is probably the most anticipated event in the world, in our country, and especially in Prince Edward Island. And after bringing this up yesterday, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that some of the calls that I received, people are concerned, and it's extremely important. We're all tired of the virus, obviously, and all of us have been working so hard to prevent community spread and do our part. I think the government and Dr. Morrison have done an admirable job of ensuring Prince Edward Island leads the country, and I think we all should be proud of that. But, Mr. Speaker, I was disappointed yesterday. It's been 9 months, and the answers that I got from the minister were very vague and really no direction. And I'm constantly getting people asking these questions, and maybe I'll take it a step further back from my questions yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and ask the minister, how many doses will we be asking for the first 3 to 6 months?
Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I alluded to yesterday, or responded to yesterday, the immunization working group right now is actually going through that. They're working and meeting to identify the most vulnerable population, whether it be our seniors, whether it be our Indigenous population, Mr. Speaker. So what they're doing right now is the work that needs to be done in order to identify who will receive the vaccine first, the numbers that will be required. Mr. Speaker, from speaking with Dr. Morrison yesterday, right now what we're looking at is probably somewhere between 26,000 to 30,000 doses coming in early January, and we'll roll those out as quickly as possible. And Mr. Speaker, again, as I said yesterday, it takes work. There's a lot of work behind the scenes to ensure that we have a good program in place. But we're doing that in partnership with the federal government and all the other provinces and territories across Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Cornwall Meadowbanks.
Well, that's a much better answer than yesterday, Minister, I can tell you that. But, you know, Minister, we've got, what, 2,000 nurses, 1,700 teachers. We've got 32,000 seniors aged 65 and over. And then we have a population that has people with CPOD and, you know, compromised, thank you, and compromised immune deficiencies. So these are the types of questions that we're getting, and I'm sure you're getting them as well. And then the latest Angus Reid poll said there's 60,000 Islanders that want the vaccine as soon as it's released, Mr. Speaker. So you're going to have, Minister, a pile of work ahead of you. You have 8 or 9 months to decipher this stuff and get prepared for
Question.
it. How many doses do you think are going to be required to satisfy these numbers?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, there is a lot of work to be done in this. And, Mr. Speaker, over the last 8 or 9 months, we had no idea when or if a vaccine would become available. Mr. Speaker, this is new. This pandemic, this virus is new. The scientific world has done yeoman's work in regards to fast tracking the vaccine for this virus. Mr. Speaker, as I said yesterday, Pfizer is the first one that's probably going to come available. Their clinical trials are almost complete. It then has to be approved by Health Canada. Mr. Speaker, Moderna is the next one that will be coming online. They're a little bit further behind Pfizer, but probably about 30 days to 45 days later, they will probably follow the same process of approval through Health Canada as well. So, Mr. Speaker, as fast as we can get the vaccine here, we will be immunizing Islanders. But as far as the number goes, we're going to ensure that we have vaccine for every Islander that wants and requires, and we're urging Islanders to be vaccinated. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, in the media the last couple of days, you have the Honourable Members, comrades in Alberta and Ontario getting out in front of this. Whether it's right or wrong, or whether we believe it or not, doesn't really matter. But what does scare a lot of Islanders? What does scare a lot of Islanders, Mr. Speaker? Well, you're talking about Jason Kenney and Mr. Ford, so whether we believe it or not, whatever. But you're talking about an island that has had no cases. So when the federal government sits down and says, okay, where are we going to distribute these? Where are we going to distribute these? Is it important to distribute them to Prince Edward Island, who's done an excellent job, and reward them? Well, I certainly hope so. But when you have possibly 10,000 new cases a day going to happen here in the near future, are we going to get our fair share? Is this government and this premier and this minister lobbying our ministers and lobbying the Minister of Health federally to ensure that we get our fair share?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, there has been a lot of talk in the media the last while about some of the provinces that have come out and arbitrarily stated the numbers of doses they're getting. It's unfortunate that they did that, because now the federal government, who's leading this project, is now saying, no, you can't be quoting that. Mr. Speaker, we believe in cooperation. We believe in partnership. That's the approach that we're taking. We're not trying to do this on our own. Mr. Speaker, as I said before, every Islander that we feel or that does require vaccination for COVID-19, we will have a vaccine available for them. It's going to take a staged approach. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm very confident in the work that our professionals in the healthcare system are doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Morel-Donagh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On National Child Day, I thought I would ask some questions on the promised pre-K program here in PEI. I know it was deferred by the Minister of Education coming into our schools for this fall, and I think that was probably a good decision. I was very proud to campaign on the promise of a pre-K program going into our schools, but I want it done right as well. Question to the Minister of Education: can you give us an update on where we're at in the planning for pre-K?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Well, I just met with the Early Childhood Development Team the other day to get an update, and things are progressing well. Both on the curriculum side, that's really coming into place. In terms of getting additional ECEs to fill the spots, Holland College has a great early childhood education blended learning program. There's a new cohort of 20 starting in January. We've got infrastructure that's being allocated to make sure we have enough space. We just designated 5 new centres, which will allow them to bring their ECEs up to the wage grid and ensure that they're in a good spot as well to support pre-K. And of course, we're working on our legislative, our management plan, our operating budget that's going to come forward here and be tabled sometime in February, March. And I believe all the pieces are falling into place. Is it going to be a challenge? Yes, I still think it will be a challenge, but I believe we're on track. Thank you.
The honourable member from Morel-Donagh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of constituents who are excited, but also, apprehensive a little bit too. They want to know, they're used to registering their children for early learning centres. They're used to registering their children for the kindergarten program. Can the minister give us an update on when registration for this pre-K program will start?
The Honourable Minister of Education, Lifelong Learning.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. So right now, I think it's important to note that 3/4 of eligible children are already in some sort of pre-K program. They may not have the finalized curriculum exactly the way we want it, but we already have processes in place for children to register. So at this time, continue to go through your normal processes to contact the early years centres to make sure that you're on, hopefully not on a wait list, but your child is registered to go forward. And so the registration process is ongoing. It's already started. It's a little bit different than what's happening in kindergarten, but we're following the regular processes to when you send your 4-year-olds off to early years centres. Thank you.
The honourable member from Morel-Donagh, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know we have our curriculum, we have a registration, we have the spacing requirements. I wonder would the Minister of Education would release a timeline so that not only can us in the House can hold your department to account, but also so that the parents and the school population gives them a sense of the schedule of this rollout so that we know it's orderly, we know that these things are being taken care of. Would your department consider releasing a timeline of how this will roll out?
The Honourable Minister of Education, Lifelong Learning.
Well, thanks, Mr. Speaker. And yes, that's definitely something we consider. As I mentioned, we're just going through the the management plan process, our operating budget, and that's where you line up the funding with the different goals like I talked about when it comes to space, when it comes to early childhood educators, making sure we have enough, and rolling out the curriculum. And so I would say that early spring is when we'll have a good timeline like that we can share with everyone. I hope that meets the expectations of the member across, but I would say that I'll push for as early as I can get it. How about that?
The honourable member from Summerside-Wilmot.
This government allowed pumping to occur from the Dunk River despite the river being below maintenance levels. This went against the province's water extraction policy. Question to the Minister of Environment. Did your department advise you that this withdrawal would be safe and within regulations?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Water and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Member, for such an important question on such an important topic to Islanders. Water. I was appointed in this role 9 months ago, and something that has been abundantly clear to me is our Islanders care deeply about our most precious resource, which is water. Certainly, as the member across knows, she sits on the Standing Committee for Natural Resource. Islanders they all have said they want this Water Act proclaimed, and that is ultimately what's most important to me in my department. The Water Act will alleviate any uncertainty. It will have taken the judgment out of this decision. So I'm just really looking forward to the committee proposing its recommendations on the initial draft that we had presented to them actually last July 2019, if you can well believe that. So certainly, Mr. Speaker, again, water, our most important resource, and I look forward to working with the committee and all our watershed groups across the island as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside-Wilmot, final question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure that's much of an answer on whether or not the department approved this. Islanders increasingly hear members of this government say we have to follow the science on water. Some are saying that the Environment Minister isn't following the science of her own department, but others are saying the Premier overruled her. Question to the Minister. Did this decision come from you or the Premier?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Water and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I speak here, I speak on behalf of government. This was a decision that our government made. Following the decision, the Premier and I both sat down with the Watershed Alliance and with the Watershed Group in that area, and we made a commitment to ensuring that going forward, we meet on a regular basis and that we ensure that their voices are heard on all of these decisions. Again, the Water Act, I can't tell you how important it is for us to get this proclaimed, and the Water Act will take judgment out of this. It will provide clarity to islanders, the clarity that all of us want in this room. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the question again. Certainly an important endeavor, and I'm really looking forward to having this act proclaimed.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Communities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on a point of order to correct a statement that was earlier said in the House by the Leader of the Opposition. The Leader of the Opposition, in my opinion, led this House to believe that government has not supported the company of Baitmasters in any form. I'd like to correct the member and state that the government of PEI, in consultation, or pardon me, in conjunction with the federal government, provided a grant for $85,755. They also provided a loan in the amount of $566,595. We also provided a labor rebate. Innovation provided a rent rebate and subsidy. We also provided assistance in putting three-phase power down to the new facility. The member from Cornwall Meadowbank also assisted the company in paving to make the road adequate to support that structure of that transportation going down there. In my opinion, Honourable Speaker, the Honourable member led this House to believe something that was not factual. I think the only person, Mr. Speaker, that has not supported Baitmasters is the Leader of the Opposition.
Honourable Minister, I'll take that point of order under advisement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Statements by ministers. The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in recognition of the International Transgender Day of Remembrance. Today, we honor the memory of those trans, two-spirit, non-binary, and gender-diverse people who have tragically lost their lives to transphobic or anti-transgender violence. We remember and mourn all those individuals who have been victims of homicide. Mr. Speaker, it deeply saddens me that this violence is still happening here in Canada. While we acknowledge that violence happens for many unjust reasons, today we honor the lives of those who were victims of violence because of their gender identity and gender expression. Mr. Speaker, this is just unacceptable. It is increasingly important that we continue to raise awareness and educate Islanders on these issues. I want to recognize the tremendous work of Peers Alliance and the PEI Transgender Network. These two organizations are so passionate and dedicated. I want to thank you all for everything you do for the transgender community right across PEI. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased that we continue to work with Peers Alliance and the PEI Transgender Network, who do provide valuable insight into how we can enhance supports. Within the health system, we have established policy and processes to support gender-confirming surgeries as an insured service to Islanders. Health PEI has established a transgender steering committee with community representation to help patients navigate the health system. Mr. Speaker, when Bill 24, the bill banning conversion therapy, was passed in this legislature, it was a monumental Memorial Day. This isn't just about health care. This reaches across government, all levels, and throughout the community. Here in Prince Edward Island, we pride ourselves on our diversity. It makes us unique, it makes us special, it makes PEI a place where people are largely welcomed and accepted. But unfortunately, we know the stigma still exists, and individuals can still be marginalized by society. So there is still more to be done. Mr. Speaker, we all need to embrace diversity and support equality. I look forward to attending the flag raising later today in recognition of this important day and listening to messages from the community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the Minister's statement and I thank him for it. And every time we uphold the rights of a minority group, we strengthen our society and our community. And when we have diversity and inclusion in all areas, our society is strengthened. And a comment made earlier by my colleague in her opening remarks in her member statement about being your beautiful, unique self every day and feeling safe and supported in doing that is resonating with me right now. The Premier spoke yesterday quite beautifully, actually, about his discomfort during the debate of Motion 95, which was promoting racial awareness in government practices. Discomfort not because he had any concern with the motion at all. In fact, he's fully supportive. I know that, and he said that. Everything that the motion stood for, but fear of misspeaking and saying something that might be misconstrued or interpreted in a way that... And I think many of us feel similarly intimidated when we're speaking in the language of the transgender community. It takes a little while to get used to hearing pronouns they, them, referring to an individual, and I'm starting to get used to that. And we're in a transition ourselves, and I think many of us are getting there to find that a normal and acceptable and just a usual day-to-day circumstance. But we're still a long way away from that. The Minister mentioned gender-affirming surgery, and of course that doesn't happen here. That happens typically in Montreal, I believe. But that surgery doesn't happen in isolation, and I'm very pleased the province offers supports for that surgery. But in order for that to be successful, there need to be supports prior to the surgery, during, and of course afterwards. Supports like hormonal therapy and counselling. And currently with the shutting of Clinic 554, and again my colleague mentioned that in one of her questions earlier today, we have lost those services in this region. I know a year ago, November the 20th, 2019, the Minister made a comment about hoping to repatriate those services, and that there was a clinician here on Prince Edward Island that was going to provide hormonal and counselling services to the transgender community. I didn't hear him re-announce that today, so my sense is that has not happened. So we still have some huge gaps for the transgender and gender diverse community here in Prince Edward Island, and that was a year ago. The Minister promised that early in the year, and that would have been this year, that those supports, those services, that treatment would be available. And it's unacceptable that this portion of our society does not have the basic medical supports and services that they require. All transgender and gender diverse people want is to be treated with the same level of respect and dignity as every other islander. And I want to close by thanking Peers Alliance for their fantastic advocacy, and of course the PEI Transgender Network as well for their ongoing work to make sure that this community is fully supported and that they advocate for the services that they so deeply and dearly deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, West Riding.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the Minister for his statement, his important statement. Members of our 2S LGBTQ plus community suffer a disproportionate amount of discrimination. 70% of transgender youth in Canada have suffered discrimination, including acts of violence. We know that we as legislators must continue to push the envelope. We must work every day to ensure transgender members of our society feel welcomed, safe, and that their concerns are valid and being addressed. Mr. Speaker, 69% of transgender youth have considered suicide seriously, and 20% of homeless youth identify as members of the 2S LGBTQ plus community. Mr. Speaker, and as the Minister said, this is not acceptable, and more must be done to ensure that people get the assistance and advocacy they need. Groups right here in Prince Edward Island have been making great efforts to bring more awareness to these ongoing issues. The Peers Alliance works tirelessly to ensure that the public is ever cognizant of the needs of these individuals. Mr. Speaker, it's my hope to live in a world where these acts of discrimination towards individuals and the transgender community is a thing of the past. We need to do everything possible to support these groups like Peers Alliance in their effort to make PEI a more inclusive province. Listening, I kind of wrote down 5 key areas, and I think we must continue to be aware, advocate, be persistent, support, and educate moving forward to end this discrimination. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As I alluded to in my greetings, it's a pleasure to rise today and recognize National Child Day, a special day that marks the celebration of our children and young people. National Child Day is celebrated around the world on November 20th to commemorate the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. The convention sets out the rights of children and states that all children be treated with dignity and respect, have the opportunity to have a voice, be protected from harm, be provided with their basic needs, and to have every opportunity to reach their full potential. National Child Day, Mr. Speaker, is about celebrating our leaders of tomorrow and recognizing the importance of giving children the best start in life. We know that our future is in our children's hands, and we know that we must all work together to ensure that they are safe and supported in every way as they grow, learn, and develop. We are fortunate in Prince Edward Island to have supportive families, people, and communities who care deeply for our children and together work together to give them a strong start in life. We are grateful, Mr. Speaker, for the PEI Child and Youth Table members who advocate the rights of children and youth in our province and promote for a greater voice in the decisions that matter to them, Mr. Speaker. And as I tried to do earlier, and I have done numerous times, give great credit to the honourable member from Charlottetown Victoria Park for initiating this important initiative, getting it started, and for the minister responsible for the status of women, the two who work together to kick the table off, and to Mara Bernstein and all the group who keep it going now. It's a wonderful, wonderful initiative and one that we all should be proud of. Mr. Speaker, with the support from the Early Childhood Development Association, we've built a solid foundation for early childhood education that allows our children to thrive, and we need to continue that momentum. We are very proud of our knowledgeable and caring early childhood educators, Mr. Speaker, who provide our youngest islanders with incredible opportunities to learn and to grow. And through their care and commitment, they have created the best learning and early child care system, I believe, in Canada, Mr. Speaker, and they continue to make PEI a great place for children. Finally, Mr. Speaker, it's important that we ensure that our children know today and each and every day that we are here to listen to their concerns and ideas, to support them in their needs, and to work with them to build a bright future where they have every opportunity for success, well-being, and happiness. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My notes are kind of all over the place here. We have so much to learn from our children. Their innocence, the way they see the world, and their lack of judgment. This morning when my husband got up before I did and he went to wake up our son Hunter, and the first thing I heard out of Hunter's mouth was just sheer anger at the world this morning. And I just kind of listened to what was going on, and he was so angry that the snow that was on the ground when he went to bed last night was gone. And I would bet that most adults in this room felt the exact opposite when they woke up this morning, that the snow was gone, they were thrilled. And so that innocence, it's something that we really, as adults, I think, overlook the beauty and not quite appreciate children the way that we should all the time. Earlier this year, with a team of talented people and the support of the Premier, we started the very first Child and Youth Table in Canada. And in that time, also appointed our very first independent child and youth advocate. Indeed, a huge step forward as a province. And we still have a huge amount of work to do. The best way to put our money where our mouth is to ensure that children and youth are at decision-making tables, to show we truly understand and support the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child. In this day and age, more than ever, we are making decisions on things that are and will directly impact the lives of our children and youth. Climate change, pandemic, economic recovery, diversity, equity, they need to have a say. And that is exactly why it is important to lower the voting age. By doing so, we fully commit to putting our money where our mouth is and fully upholding and empowering the United Nations on the rights of the child. And I look forward to the support of this House on that bill. To all those in our province who work with children every day, thank you. The work that you do is invaluable, and I wish that your pay reflected how much you are valued. To all the children and youth across this province, we see you, we value you, and we will do everything in our power to uphold and respect the United Nations on the rights of the child. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Premier, for your statement. Mr. Speaker, today is National Child Day, and I am honoured to rise and acknowledge the critical importance of ensuring the rights of children right across the world is upheld. Mr. Speaker, National Child Day is a day to recognise our country's commitment to the rights of the children as outlined in the UN Declaration of the Rights of the Child in 1959 and the UN Convention on Rights of the Child in 1989. Mr. Speaker, as politicians here in Prince Edward Island, we must work every day to uphold and ensure that children around the world, but especially right here at home, are protected by law in order to give them the best possible opportunity to achieve over the course of their lifetime. Mr. Speaker, I am proud to stand here today and commend this legislature's efforts to uphold the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, that's the end of minister statements. Presenting and receiving petitions. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By leave of the House, I beg leave to table a government briefing note on the potential closure of Clinic 554 and gaps in services that would result for Trans Islanders. And I move, seconded by Summerside Wilmot, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By leave of the House, I beg leave to table a government briefing note on gender-conforming surgery, and I move, seconded by Summerside Wilmot, that said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table written correspondence from myself to the Honourable Lawrence MacAulay, Federal Minister of Veteran Affairs, and copy to the Federal Minister of Health, Minister Hadu. And Mr. Speaker, I move, second by the Honourable Premier, that the said documents be now do be received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? No more? The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I present herewith a message from Her Honour, the Honourable Antoinette Perry, Lieutenant Governor of Prince Edward Island, which said message is signed by Her Honour.
Honourable members, shall ask the clerk to read the message from Her Honour. Honourable members will please stand while the message is being read.
Dear Mr. Speaker, Her Honour, the Honourable Antoinette Perry, Lieutenant Governor of the Province of Prince Edward Island, hereby transmits the estimates of capital revenue and capital expenditure required to carry on the public services of the province for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2022, and also until the passage of the capital estimates for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. In accordance with the provisions of the Constitution Act 1867 and the Prince Edward Island Terms of Union 1873, Her Honour recommends the same to the Legislative Assembly. Commended by Paul Ledwell and Her Honour, the Lieutenant Governor of Prince Edward Island.
Thank you. Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, by command of Her Honour, I present herewith the estimates of capital revenue and capital expenditure required to carry on the public services of the province for the fiscal year ending 31st of March 2022, and also until the passage of capital estimates for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. And I move, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Finance, that said estimates be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Finance, that consideration of the estimates of capital review, and capital expenditure in committee of the whole House be added to the orders of the day until such times as they are dispatched.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Bonjour, Madame and Monsieur Quay. Welcome. It gives me great pleasure to rise in this Assembly and share with my colleagues in the House the projected capital spending by the Government of Prince Edward Island for the 2021-22 budgetary year. As we all well appreciate, Mr. Speaker, these are unusual times. For all of us here today, these are unprecedented times. But our history shows we have been here before. Perhaps not each of us personally, but certainly our parents, our grandparents, and even our great-grandparents. Times like these are part of our collective memory, part of our history, the history that has shaped us as people and as a community. The smallpox pandemic of the 19th century, the 2 world wars, the Spanish flu pandemic, the Great Depression, the polio epidemic, and countless other economic shocks and upheavals over the past number of decades have all tested us as a people, as a society, and as an economy. Each of these events have served to remind us that even here in the relative safety of our tiny island province, we are part of a global community. Events that are not of our making and that originate far beyond our shores can nonetheless intrude on us and upset the natural rhythm of our lives, of our communities, and of our economy. But, Mr. Speaker, we must not despair. Together, we will survive this test, just as those who came before us survived the tests that confronted them. Indeed, it is often during times of crisis and challenge that we see people and communities draw on that deep well of strength and resilience that we hold in reserve for precisely times like these. As my departmental officials and I were preparing the capital budget, I couldn't help but think about the examples of previous administrations and the actions that they undertook when faced with similar challenges as we find ourselves here today. Their response was one of bold leadership and commitment to their nations, Mr. Speaker. Their response was always a statement of confidence in the people and the businesses of their respective countries. Their response was always a declaration of faith in the future, a future that could be more equitably shared by all citizens. And most importantly, a vital and timely investment in the very infrastructure required to attain and sustain the future. Mr. Speaker, our capital budget makes a similar bold and unequivocal statement of faith and commitment to the people, the communities, and the future of Prince Edward Island. To the people of Prince Edward Island, your government is saying, we believe in you. We believe in us. We believe we have a future beyond COVID-19, and we are prepared to invest in that future and to help make that future a reality. The document that I present to this House for discussion and approval outlines planned spending of $195.9 million for the 2021-22 fiscal year. Over the 5-year life of the plan. Over the 5-year life of the plan, we will see record capital spending of $747.6 million. This investment not only continues government's commitment to building and maintaining the vital infrastructure required to provide the services valued by islanders, it also makes a bold statement about this government's confidence in the people and the economy of Prince Edward Island. The 5-year plan touches every element of our economy and will improve the lives of all islanders. Projects outlined in the plan include investments in healthcare, education, tourism and culture, social housing, transportation, energy, and our environment. Times of crises do not call on government to be a shrinking violet, Mr. Speaker. Times of crisis call on government to be bright and to be bold, always prepared to change its orientation and direction to take on the challenges that we face. The document that I present today, Mr. Speaker, reflects some changes in orientation and direction. Not only changes forced upon us by the imposition of the pandemic, but also changes brought about by the adoption of new policies and new objectives on the part of government, and as aspired by all parties in this Assembly. As I share with colleagues highlights of the capital budget, members will hear repeated reference to the path towards a net zero 2040. The objectives outlined in that initiative, the goal of achieving net zero carbon emissions by the year 2040, have played a major role in shaping the current capital budget. We believe, Mr. Speaker, that these are important investments in sustaining our future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for your indulgence as I share with this House some of the highlights of the 2021-22 capital budget. Mr. Speaker, it is a truism to say that our future lies in our children. It is befitting, therefore, that we invest appropriately to ensure that they have the very best environment, tools, and technology to advance their learning and assume natural leadership roles in our community and in our economy. I am pleased to announce, Mr. Speaker, we have added a further $23.4 million to the 5-year plan for school construction and renovation, bringing the total to $113.2 million over the 5-year period. To be specific, Mr. Speaker, the government has committed a further $4.1 million to the construction of a new high school in the rapidly expanding town of Stratford, bringing the new commitment to that project to $42.1 million. We are committed to ensuring that this school will also be net zero. Mr. Speaker, the Sherwood Elementary School was built in 1956, and while successive governments have invested in the facility over the years, our understanding of what constitutes a welcoming and effective learning environment for our children has changed. The design and the structure of Sherwood School can no longer be tweaked to stay abreast of those changes. Children and parents in that community deserve to have a modern learning facility with access to the most recent up-to-date technology. Accordingly, this capital budget provides a further $2.8 million to the Sherwood Elementary project for a total commitment of $25.2 million. Among other things, the additional funds will ensure the new school is designed and built to net zero carbon standards. On the other side of our capital city, Mr. Speaker, this budget commits $6.5 million in new spending to expand the school in West Royalty. This important investment in this rapidly growing community will begin immediately with construction tenders being awarded this fall. And in Summerside, Mr. Speaker, the budget makes provision for an expenditure of $4.8 million to complete the expansion of École Saumur to accommodate high school students. We all know, Mr. Speaker, that our schools have always played a vital role in defining us as a community. Our schools embody more than books and learning. They are both the source and repository of our community pride and history. To that end, discussions are underway with the schools and community users in a number of island communities, seeking to best determine the needs for the various groups and to ensure that our schools are not only a vital hub of learning, but also a cherished center to celebrate our culture and community life. With this budget, I am pleased to announce additional funding to school renovations and improvements at Elliott River Elementary and Montague Consolidated. At Elliott River Elementary, $4.3 million has been added to the capital budget for that project, bringing the total commitment to $9.8 million. And at Montague Consolidated, Mr. Speaker, a further $2 million has been added to the capital budget for a new total investment of $8.4 million. In addition, we are making an increased commitment in this capital budget for École Evangeline with $16.6 million earmarked for the school infrastructure, along with an expected contribution from the federal government for the community center aspect of Evangeline. We will, together with the community, in the heart of this Acadian community, see a revitalization of this important facility. In each of these circumstances, Mr. Speaker, the additional funding will not only upgrade the base building, it will also improve our energy efficiencies to assist in meeting our net zero targets. while at the same time breathe new life into these aging facilities to ensure they continue to play a crucial role in the educational, cultural life of their respective communities. In addition to the major investments and capital improvements to schools just outlined, Mr. Speaker, this budget also provides $4 million for regular maintenance and repair of the 62 schools across the province for the upcoming fiscal year. Through this capital budget, a total of $12 million has been allocated to fund the replacement of roofs, boilers, fuel tanks, windows, and many small and ongoing capital repair requirements for our school system. A critical element of our education system is a fleet of familiar yellow school buses that fan out across the province each morning and afternoon, safely delivering our precious cargo to and from their classrooms. We are committed to ensuring our children's continued safety with the regular and orderly replacement of our fleet of buses as it ages. With the generous participation of the federal government, we are announcing an increase of $15.4 million over the 5-year plan for the purchase of electric-powered school buses. This brings the total commitment to $31.5 million. The additional funding will enable the purchase of up to 90 new buses. This capital investment will not only ensure the safety of our children, it will also carry us further down the path to net zero emissions by 2040. Mr. Speaker, we are fortunate to have our children safely back to school. We thank our teachers, administrators, parents, and students for their attentiveness and adherence to the public health protocols and guidelines that keep us safe from harm. Last spring's disruption to in-class learning demonstrated to all of us the important role that technology plays in our learning regimes. Appropriately, this budget commits $8.4 million to purchase new and replacement technology for use in the delivery of our curriculum. Mr. Speaker, our government continues to make the health and wellness of all Islanders a priority. Mr. Speaker, my colleague, the Minister of Health and Wellness, has shared with this House this government's vision for mental health and addiction services. This capital budget continues to advance that plan with its commitment of more than $145 million over the 5-year period. As the Minister has shared, the plan looks to modernize not only the facilities, but also the delivery of mental health services. This vision is grounded in a community-first model that nurtures an integrated continuum of services that provides the right care at the right time by the right providers and close to home. Components of the plan include community access centers, improvements to mental health services in the emergency rooms, and long-term supportive housing solutions. To deliver on this vision, several capital redevelopment projects have been recommended to be built or retrofitted to align with the operational and program planning for our mental health and addiction system. An overall site plan for the land where the Hillsborough Mental Health Hospital currently sits has been developed, and the process to replace the facility with a new 64-bed acute care mental health and addictions hospital has already begun. Other components of the overall plan are already underway. Tenders for the social housing and day program facilities, comprising a new 8-person structured housing day program facility and a new 12-bed women's addiction extended residence, have been awarded. Work on these projects will begin immediately. Mr. Speaker, while much of the attention for mental health and addiction services has focused on the creation of the mental health campus, other areas and aspects of our mental health needs have not been forgotten. The capital budget also makes an allowance in its 5-year vision for an upgrade of services and facilities for acute mental health and addiction services at the Prince County Hospital. Mr. Speaker, in outlining the capital spending initiatives related to mental health and addictions, I made reference to the community-first model of care. That same model of care is also envisioned for general health services. Healthcare hubs throughout the province will deliver an integrated continuum of services, providing interdisciplinary care, engaging all of our health professionals, ensuring they are supported by the latest and most appropriate technologies, and delivered in optimally designed spaces. The vision for all healthcare services is to provide the right care at the right time by the right providers and close to home. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, this capital budget makes provision for an investment of almost $20 million to make our plan a reality. Over the next 2 years, this government will be addressing the healthcare needs of West Prince with an investment of $3.7 million, Kings County with an investment of $7 million, and in Summerside, an investment of $9 million. Each of these investments will enable renewed and strengthened community-based primary care in their respective communities. Mr. Speaker, crucial to the healthcare hub model of care are our 5 rural hospitals and our 2 major referral hospitals. Regular maintenance and upgrading of the facilities as an ongoing commitment and an essential capital investment, I am pleased to announce the funding for maintenance and improvements at Island Healthcare facilities will see a major boost in this 5-year plan. The total projected expenditure of $25.3 million includes an enhanced investment this year of an additional $7.8 million to be allocated for repair and upkeep of this crucial infrastructure. This significant new proposed investment is made further possible through the active partnership with the federal government. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, we all need to express our thanks to the federal government for its significant ongoing investment in critical capital projects in our province. Mr. Speaker, as all members know, Health Canada and the federal government are not our only partners in the delivery of healthcare services in this province. The various healthcare and hospital foundations continue to do an exceptional job in raising the necessary funds to ensure our healthcare facilities have the latest equipment and technology. This budget makes provision for an investment of more than $33 million in new and replacement equipment for the island hospitals. Much of this is made possible through the generosity of islanders. Almost $20 million is funded through contributions from the hospital foundations. We express our gratitude to the various foundations and the many islanders who donate and support their valued work. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of a computer-based patient record system has been an ongoing project spanning several administrations. As members can appreciate, the system is complex, requiring the integration of multiple networks and channels of information and data from various sources. I am pleased to announce that with a $7.6 million investment, we will be able to add an important piece to this complex puzzle, an electronic medical record system. Despite the fact that the distraction and immediacy of the pandemic caused delays in project implementation, we will, with this investment, be able to integrate vital healthcare information from other provinces and systems such as doctors' offices, labs, and pharmacies to provide a complete and secure electronic health care record for every islander to support the delivery of health care. In last year's capital budget, Mr. Speaker, I was honored to announce funding for 100 government-owned social housing units. This year, we commit to completing those construction efforts, which includes 32 units in Summerside, 10 units in both Morel and Georgetown, and 48 units in Charlottetown. These units will be a blend of seniors and family housing. The investment in provincially owned housing construction is only one part of housing solution in our province. Currently, there are over 1,200 units under construction, with 330 of these affordable units initiated by government. We have also introduced 250 new mobile rental vouchers to island families, bringing our direct support through vouchers and rental supplements to 1,170 islanders. In total, Mr. Speaker, 2,767 individuals and families in this province are receiving active housing support directly from our government. We know more needs to be done each year. In addition to the committed spending for units coming into supply, Mr. Speaker, we are, with this budget, providing new allocations of $3 million for transitional housing and a further $11.9 million to fund additional units for senior and family housing in areas of need across this province. Mr. Speaker, an efficient economy requires an efficient transportation network. Over this past year, the Department of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy has overseen the construction and maintenance of a record number of kilometers of highways and collector roads. Not since the 1970s and the years of the Comprehensive Development Plan have we seen such a flurry of activity. Included in this year's capital budget is funding to complete the extensive changes designed to improve the safety and flow of traffic at the juncture of St. Peter's Highway and the Perimeter Highway. In addition to being Canada's first continuous flow intersection, also called a crossover displaced left turn, the project includes 3 roundabouts for the intersections at McWilliams, Angus, and McRae Drives, as well as a new structure to support 4 lanes at Wrights Creek and 2 active transportation lanes to accommodate walkers and cyclists. With the assistance of shared funding from the federal government, we continue with the repair and replacement of national and collector highway network. Almost $102 million has been allocated for that effort over the 5-year plan. As well, we are pleased to announce the addition of $5 million for the repair and replacement of bridge infrastructure across the province, bringing our total commitment to $36.5 million. Excuse me, Mr. Speaker. In keeping with our commitment to the environment and our path toward a net zero initiative for 2040, I am pleased to announce a number of new initiatives and additional investments. Mr. Speaker, $250,000 has been added to the capital budget in each of the next 5 years to continue the process of upgrading our fleet of heavy equipment. This adds to the additional $250,000 per year committed in last year's budget to begin the electrification of our fleet of 370 light vehicles. To accommodate and support the conversion of electric vehicles, we have also added $120,000 to the capital budget for a total of $870,000 to install electric vehicle charging stations throughout this province. Mr. Speaker, members will recall that the current operating budget committed funding to support our municipal partners in transforming current roadways and pathways into active transportation corridors, welcoming walkers and cyclists. This capital budget provides an additional $5 million to carry out similar work on provincially owned roads and pathways. Mr. Speaker, in keeping with our commitment to the environment and our efforts to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, we have committed $1.8 million to finalize the installation of biomass units in approximately 20 government-owned facilities across the province. Mr. Speaker, 2023 promises to be an exciting year for the province of Prince Edward Island, as we once again play host to our provincial and territorial neighbours at the Canada Winter Games. It's an opportunity for our local athletes to compete before a home crowd, and it's an opportunity for Prince Edward Islanders to display our legendary hospitality. In preparation for the Games, upgrades are underway to refresh and improve the facilities at the Mark Arends Provincial Ski Park. $4.3 million has been committed to this effort over the next 2 years. The park will be one of the many sites hosting the 2023 Canada Games. In addition to the work at our provincial ski park, Mr. Speaker, this budget provides $3.1 million to upgrade our provincially owned campsites, to provide more 3-way sites, improved Wi-Fi services, washroom upgrades, and replacement of maintenance equipment. Our provincially owned golf courses will also receive a total of $2.5 million. In our ongoing commitment to preserve the natural and built heritage of our province, Mr. Speaker, we are continuing with the capital program for provincial museums with an investment of $1 million over 5 years. This additional funding will be used for capital repair projects at Beaconsfield Historic House in Charlottetown, as well as restoration undertakings at the Stanley Lindsay House in Orwell and the Taylor House in North Bedeck. I am pleased to announce, Mr. Speaker, a new initiative which will see the expenditure of an additional $50,000 over each of the next 2 years to support Public Art Fund. The Museum and Heritage Foundation will receive and assess proposals from local artists for the commissioning of the work that will be added to the collection available for public display. We believe the work of our talented artists should be publicly displayed for the benefit of all Islanders. Among those projects anticipated, Mr. Speaker, we will work with our Black, Indigenous, people of color, commonly known as BIPOC community, in establishing public art that reflects the importance diversity plays in our communities. Excuse me. Mr. Speaker, in the area of justice and public safety, I am pleased to announce the provision of an additional $2.4 million to build a dedicated women's unit at our Provincial Correctional Centre that will provide multidimensional treatment for addiction, mental illness, and trauma recovery. This is an initiative that has long been advocated for by organizations such as the John Howard and Elizabeth Fry Societies. Mr. Speaker, government continues to invest in the upgrading of our information technology systems and hardware. Along with several other provinces and territories, we are participating in developing a new and integrated court system that will enable the sharing of court and sentencing information across jurisdictional boundaries. We have committed an additional $1.5 million to this project, bringing our total investment to $3.1 million. Excuse me. As well, Mr. Speaker, we continue with our commitment of $35.7 million over the next 5 years to improve and modernize our government's information technology systems. We'll be advancing the digitization of government and improving our online services to Islanders, which has proven to be ever so important over the last few months. We will upgrade and modernize our legacy systems, as well as invest in the improvement of our infrastructures and our servers, desktops, laptops, and wireless capabilities. Excuse me, to improve program delivery, records retention, and service to Islanders. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, let me say I am proud to be associated with this document. I'm proud to be associated with this chamber and with this government. I said at the onset of my remarks, Mr. Speaker, that in times of crisis such as these, governments must be bold and decisive. This is not a time to retreat. It behooves us as a government to use the spending power entrusted in us by the people and the taxpayers of Prince Edward Island to stimulate and support our economy. I believe the document I have presented here today does precisely that. It is, at the same time, responsive and responsible. What we have outlined are essential and timely investments in the future of Prince Edward Island. When we emerge from this pandemic, and I am confident we will, our provincial economy will be able to hit the ground running. We will look back on this time and say, we did the right thing. Above all, Mr. Speaker, this capital budget places the emphasis exactly where it should be, on the people of Prince Edward Island, on our children in our schools, on our loved ones needing health care, on our neighbors seeking safe and efficient transportation to and from their communities, on our friends who need appropriate and affordable housing, and on our family who needs opportunity for active living in the face of the stress and pressures we all have faced during COVID-19. I look forward to debate that will arise with my legislative colleagues on this, the capital budget of 2021-22. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've only just received this budget this morning, and my colleagues and I look forward to going through it in greater detail over the upcoming weeks. But on first glance, we see that what I think is the largest capital budget ever. A budget indicates where a government's true values lie, what priorities are deserving of funding. To quote Joe Biden, Don't tell me what you value. Show me in your budget and I'll tell you what you value. Despite all the promises in this budget, I see some troubling indications of where this government's values lie. There may be a few green ideas sprinkled through it, and we appreciate those, but don't be fooled. This is definitely not a green budget. A green budget would not try to use paving to stimulate the economy. This government knows full well that the jobs that are created by this spending increase are overwhelmingly filled by men. Economic stimulus by paving only reinforces the inequities that women in our society face. Investments in childcare would have been a much better way to stimulate the economy and will be a key element in the COVID recovery. In our caucus budget submission for this budget, we asked for investments to add a restorative care unit at the QEH. This is an investment that would have positively impacted our frontline workers, healthcare professionals, which are predominantly women. Big surprise, this government passed on this request. If it wasn't evident already that this is a paving government, the biggest expenditure in this capital budget are, by far, on roads and bridges, $190 million worth of it. This is interesting. I didn't know we had a paving crisis, but I do know we have a housing crisis. And in contrast to the $190 million over 5 years that this government will be spending on paving, this government is only promising about $40 million over 5 years in housing. Does this mean that roads are 4 times more important than making sure every Islander has a safe place to call home? This government is more worried about every Islander having a good road rather than a good roof. Maybe if government had a better vision for infrastructure, they could build the buildings that Islanders need, not just the roads up to them. We talked a lot yesterday about the housing crisis, and that is not just happening in Charlottetown. That's keenly being felt across this province. This government has only continued to do what the last government did, which is very little in housing. Rent subsidies and a few $1 million in capital funding to private developers are definitely helpful, but they are not going to solve a housing crisis. These are really just Band-Aid solutions, but it seems to be all that the Liberal and PC governments are willing to do. They make it look like government is taking action, and it gives them opportunities for photo ops, sometimes multiple photo ops and announcements for the very same buildings. But government is really just avoiding the more difficult but necessary changes that will truly solve this problem. Things like taxation and regulation, and more holistic policy making across all provinces. I need to do a little fact check on the Premier right now. The Premier said that his government has invested hundreds of millions in housing over the last 18 months. The actual amount is more like tens of millions. And much of this is on rent supplements, which is money that goes to landlords, not to tenants. This capital budget has about $11 million in new builds over the next 5 years. With a total investment in the tens of millions of dollars overall, the Premier's math is off by a magnitude. We've seen about 100 affordable units added, but we still have 750 Islanders on the wait list. Those numbers don't lie. At this point, people are going to have to wait years for appropriate housing. What makes this more worrying is that this budget shows that government doesn't meet its own targets set in last year's, didn't meet its own targets set in last year's capital budget. They promised about $16 million in housing construction, but they spent approximately half of that. So if this government is pledging around $40 million, will they only spend half of that? That's not good enough. As we talked about in QP yesterday, every department should have an interest in housing because we have to keep telling government housing affects everything. It affects businesses and the economy, and the ability to recruit and retain employees and newcomers. It affects greenhouse gas emissions and the environment. Most of all, it affects people. It affects their ability to participate in the economy, the ability for our children to learn in school, the ability for people to stay safe and healthy, really all aspects of well-being of Islanders. This government is supposed to be about people, but their actions are not living up to their words. Speaking about not living up to their words, we've been hearing promises about the new school in Stratford and Sherwood for years now, again from both this government and the previous one. I'm glad to see the money in the budget for these two schools, but what I'm worried about is that they won't be completed for 5 to 6 years. These schools have, yet again, been delayed by another year. So that pushes it out past this government's mandate. Our kids are going to have to put up with inappropriate, overcrowded schools for years more. This government seems to have some difficult with follow-through. It is ironic that this is the day of the child. Government announces a further delay in building new and desperately needed schools for our children. Make no mistake, when we talk about overcrowded schools, we're talking about the quality of our children's education. We're talking about class sizes and the quality of teaching our hardworking teachers can deliver to our students. What's even more troubling is these delays promised for our new schools is that, once again, government has delayed the construction of the mental health campus. We've talked a lot in this sitting about mental health and addiction services, and every member in this House, I know, has heard heartbreaking stories from constituents and Islanders generally about mental health. The big capital item relating to mental health is obviously the new mental health hospital, or new mental health campus. I'd like to be happy about seeing the budget line for this, but this is a promise that's been made in every capital budget in the next year since 2017. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. There's still no shovels in the ground. And I repeat, we've been 1 year away from starting the mental health campus since 2017. How much longer will Islanders have to wait to get the mental health care they desperately need? I don't trust that this government will deliver on this critical piece of infrastructure for Islanders. Frankly, I'll believe it when the shovels are in the ground. Government has recently made a commitment to get PEI's emissions to net zero by 2040 and net zero energy by 2030. We are pleased to see that this government seems to be moving towards adopting net zero standards for all new government projects, including the new Stratford and Sherwood schools. I will note that this commitment has come as a direct result of the advocacy of our caucus, in particular the member from Charlottetown-Brighton's persistent work. When it comes to new electric school buses, this is a climate investment which is good and needed. We thank government for listening to our caucus on this, which we've been pushing for years. However, there's still a capacity issue on our school buses. Too many children per bus, 70 kids plus on some school buses. 70, that's a lot of kids on a single school bus. We don't know if anything is changing here and that will actually help our kids. With regard to greening the rest of the government vehicles, the funding for the light fleet hasn't budged. Will these vehicles also be transitioned to electric or non-emitting vehicles? Government needs to show leadership here. I will say that I'm glad to see continued investment in electric vehicle charging stations. When it comes to active transportation, I'll remind you, you're spending $190 million on roads. That's a huge increase, approximately $40 million more, but only spending $5 million on active transportation, and that runs over 4 years. Again, this shows where this government's priorities lie. If we want more Islanders to use active transportation, government is going to have to shift this balance. This budget includes some funding to finish up putting in biomass boilers in government buildings. While there may be some value in these in the long run, they are not really a carbon neutral option. Burning more wood will increase emissions in the short term, which will actually make these boilers counterproductive to reaching this government's new target of net zero by 2030. We are very happy to see investment in the Confederation Trail development. We have repeatedly said that PEI can and should be a cycling destination, and this is a step in the right direction. Investment in parks is also welcome. The Auditor General has spoken to the fact that many government tourism assets are reaching their end of useful life, so it is nice to see the commitment to funding there. In closing, I want to repeat what I told this government when they tabled the operating budget last year, because the message still applies. It is not enough to throw money at issues. Government really needs to understand what the issues are and determine appropriate methods to address the underlying concerns. Funding Band-Aid solutions is not the right or effective way to address the fractures in our society that many find themselves slipping through. We have yet to see this government demonstrate an ability to be aware of the deeper issues and address them in a meaningful and appropriate way. Mr. Speaker, I believe there is much work to be done, and I look forward to scrutinizing the details of this capital budget in the upcoming weeks. Thank you.
The honourable member from Cornwall, Middlebanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm having deja vu, Mr. Speaker, up here from last year. It seems like a similar budget. Anyway, I want to give kudos to the minister for putting this together and presenting it to, and I know the feeling of what it's like to walk down those stairs and present the budget. Now I'm in your shoes over here, so. But I will say, before I start, and it's something that stood out for me as soon as we looked at it, and as my colleague said, we just received this early this morning, so we will get to debate it in the near future in the House, on the floor. But I will say one thing that stood out immensely to me was the minister virtually glossed over the obvious shortcomings in mental health and the capital budget, and there was no mention, Mr. Speaker, of long-term care. And I think with everything that has happened in the past few months that I thought that might stand out. But Mr. Speaker, it is quite clear from our review of this capital budget that this government has absolutely no plan to address any of the true needs of Islanders. While this budget's sheer size might look impressive when you pull back the curtain, you see a document completely devoid of any vision, entirely out of tune with the needs of Islanders across the province. As presented, it is not at all clear how much of the money is coming from the federal Liberal government. I just want to touch on that, Mr. Speaker, because 95 or 96% of the money that has come into this province in the last 9 months from COVID, from the federal government, is almost equal to the amount of transfer payments we get each year. That's how much money. And this budget doesn't decipher how much money is actually being spent by this government or being produced by the federal Liberal government. As presented, it is not all clear how much money is coming from federal Liberal government in Ottawa, but I suspect our federal cousins are carrying much of the burden and are responsible for the heavy lifting. And they do deserve the credit for ensuring Islanders' needs are met through this pandemic as clearly as this provincial government is unable to do so. Mr. Speaker, the lack of vision from this budget tells a tale of just how out of touch it has become in only 18 months. Clearly, they are either ignoring the needs of Islanders or they simply don't listen anymore. It is to my dismay to see that the mental health campus investment is less than $3 million this year. A shockingly low amount given the fact that it was only a year ago that this House approved more than $12 million on capital spending for a new mental health campus. Furthermore, the coming year's anticipated spending on mental health facilities is nothing more than a government playing catch-up. For those at home wondering, when you combine this year's anticipated spending of $3 million with next year's budget spending of $9.5 million, you see that there is only a budget increase of $29,400. I asked the people struggling with mental health and addiction, is this budget increase of less than $30,000 enough in your minds? And I don't believe it is. Mr. Speaker, all the while, thousands of Islanders are on the hook to simply wait and hope that this government wakes up to the reality that face people every day, that more must be done in mental health. Mr. Speaker, not that long ago, we seen the story circulate in the media about the young adult who was struggling with mental health. This individual tried to get help, they tried to get the services they needed, they were turned away. Instead of getting the help they needed, this individual was forced to go home and intentionally overdose. But stories like this don't seem to resonate. Instead, we see a government preoccupied with paving and culverts. Paving politics in the midst of a mental health crisis shows a complete lack of empathy.
Mind sending me a paving list?
I'd like to go into a little bit of history here and remind the listeners of the Premier's promise of shovels in the ground by April 24th, 2019, a promise he made in order to ensure a political sport during the last election. Obviously a political move, and obviously it worked. But now time is act, and time was to act long ago. And perhaps this budget is nothing but old school politics as well. Perhaps this is nothing more than a pattern of outdated thinking. Perhaps this government truly believes ribbon cutting a mental health campus during the next election is more important than providing Islanders with services today. Mr. Speaker, government can dress up this document with the storytelling, Twitter posts, and window dressing they want. But the fact is, Mr. Speaker, a crucial promise to Islanders struggling with mental health and addictions has been abandoned by this government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You don't carry that? Okay. No.
Nice try. We all should just vote against it. Let's just all vote against it.
Okay, honorable members, we'll continue on. Any more tabling of documents? No more tabling of documents? Reports by committees? The honorable member from Charlottetown, Belvedere, and the opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Standing Committee on Rules, Regulations, Private Bills and Privileges, I beg leave to introduce the sixth report of the said committee, entitled Rule 22.2, Order of Business and Housekeeping Rule Changes. I move, seconded by the honourable member from Summerside Wilmot, that the report be now received and do lie on the table. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Rule 110.5 of the Rules of the Legislative Assembly, I will be moving the motion for adoption of the report on Tuesday, November 24th, 2020.
Shall I carry?
Thank you.
The honourable member from Montague, Kilmuir, and the Government Whip.
Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Standing Committee on Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability, I beg leave to introduce the second report of the said committee entitled Committee Activities. I move, seconded by the honourable member from O'Leary Inverness, that the report be now received and do lie on the table. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Rule 110.5 of the Rules of the Legislative Assembly, I will be moving the motion for adoption of the report on Tuesday, November 24th, 2020.
Shall I carry? No more reports? Introduction of government bills. Government motions. The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second by the Honourable Minister of Health that the 29th order of the day be now read.
Shall I carry?
Order 29, Medical Society Act, Bill number 77, ordered for second reading.
Shall I, the Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move seconded by the Honourable Minister of Health that the said bill be now read a second time.
Shall I carry?
Bill number 77, Medical Society Act, read a second time.
Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Health, that this House do now resolve itself into Committee of the Whole House to take into consideration the said bill.
Shall I carry? The Honourable Member from Tignish Pomeroy to Deputy Speaker to chair the Committee of the Whole House, please.
This House is now in a committee of the whole House to take into consideration a bill to be entitled Medical Society Act. A request has been made to bring someone onto the floor, a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted?
Granted.
I'm missing something.
Good afternoon. Would you please state your name and title for Hansford, please?
Nicola Hewitt, Solicitor and Legislative Specialist.
Thank you very much and welcome. Promoter, would you like to commence with a brief statement on the bill's intent?
Sure, Mr. Chair, it's fairly straightforward. It's just simply the purpose of this act is to continue the Medical Society of PEI as a corporate entity, and also to see if there's any other references to the O'Leary clause.
Thank you. Honourable members, it's the wish of the committee that the bill be now read section by section, clause by clause, or open for general questions. General questions? The floor is now open. Shall the bill up? Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Chair. So can you just clarify why physicians are, what is the purpose of this act versus other, bargaining groups that don't have their own act?
Good.
All bargaining agents are established under some form of legislation or another. For example, the PEI Union of Public Sector Employees is established under Part 2 of the Companies Act. CUPE is a division of the federal union. The Teachers Federation Act is a private act of this legislation. So they're all going to have some kind of a legal underpinning. This particular entity, the Medical Society, has been incorporated in island legislation, I'm guessing going back 50, 60 years. With the transition of medical practitioners to the regulated health professions model, the Medical Act is going to be, and has already been repealed by the legislature. That repeal has not been proclaimed. So we needed to find a mechanism to house the Medical Society. We discussed it with the Medical Society. They take a great deal of pride, and there's a lot of history associated with this organization. And we agreed with their request that we continue it on under a standalone piece of legislation.
Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke.
Genesis.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And if any other bargaining agents had a similar request that they felt that there was some sort of a reason why they might need their own act where it currently that isn't the case, is that something that would be taken under consideration?
As I alluded to when we did our prior consultations on this, this is the only bargaining agent under the Department of Health's legislation that is established in legislation. It's the only one I have.
Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Chair. And I do just want to highlight that I, of course, appreciate consultation, but this is, where we ask questions on the floor. So, that's still going to continue to happen.
Ask questions and we ask, actually accept questions during consultation too.
That's, as is your right, I suppose, but I also have the right to ask questions here, as I will continue to do so.
Yeah, sure.
Does this act, just wondering, this act, does it require all registrants to be a member of the union?
For clarity, this is not a union. It's recognition as a bargaining agent. Unions are certified. The Medical Society is not certified. Registrants are persons who are licensed by the College of Physicians and Surgeons to practice medicine on the island. And the answer to your question is yes, registrants are members. They can elect to either be a member of the society or they pay the equivalent in membership fees to the society. And it has been that way from day one.
Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke.
So, so it's my understanding this is one step in the process of repealing the Medical Act, as you say. I believe that's what you said. The other step is putting the College of Physicians and Surgeons under the Registered Health Professionals Act. Is that correct?
Under the Regulated Health Professions Act, yes.
Regulated health professions, I
Tyne
apologize.
Valley Sherbrooke?
Thank you. So can you just tell me who was consulted to dissolve the Medical Act and put the college under the RHPA?
Oh, that happened 5 or 6 years ago now, when amendments were made to the Medical Act in 2015. I would have to go back to to be honest, to go back to the file to see what consultations occurred at that time.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so 5 to 6 years ago, so during the time of the previous government. So before moving forward, then this current government didn't engage in any additional consultation just to check in and make sure that they just trusted that everything was above, that there were no further questions or concerns from any key stakeholders?
Can I go ahead? Okay. So in 2015, a decision was made that physicians were going to be coming under Regulated Health Professions Act. And accordingly, the legislature, we brought a bill before the legislature, and one of the provisions in that bill was the repeal of the current Medical Act. So that piece of the puzzle was set up. So then we've started to work with both the Medical Society and the college in terms of preparing for a transition. We've made amendments to the RHPA to facilitate this. So there's several pieces to this puzzle. We've worked with and consulted with various stakeholder groups along the way, including the Canadian Medical Protective Association. But as to exactly who we consulted with at what point in time, I don't recall, because it has been such a long process. But most recently, we've been in discussions with the Medical Society, and we've certainly been in discussions with the college.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke?
And most recently then, have there been any concerns expressed by the college or the Medical Society about this act or anything in relation to it?
Nope. In fact, we've got it in writing that the Medical Society supports this act. We provided them with a draft copy. They went through it. They requested changes. Those changes were implemented. They fully support it. This act has nothing to do with the college. They're two separate things. One's an advocacy group. One is a regulatory group.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke?
Yes, no, thank you, and I do understand that, but as was mentioned earlier, there's sort of two components to repealing the, the Medical Act, right? So that was, this, I'm just trying to understand to make sure that the consultation has been thorough and recent, because things can change, opinions can change, so, but you sound quite confident that there wouldn't be any concerns expressed, so I would hope that I won't hear about anything after this. All right, that's all, Chair. Thank you.
Shall the bill carry?
Carried. Great questions, Nate. I move the title.
Medical Society Act shall carry.
Carried. I move the enacting clause.
Be it enacted by the Lieutenant Governor and the Legislative Assembly of the Province of Prince Edward Island as follows. Shall it carry?
Carried. Mr. Chair, I move the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report the bill agreed to without amendment.
Shall it carry?
Carried.
You're welcome.
Yep. In the back room.
Can I go ahead without that up?
In the back rooms.
Can I go ahead without the mace up? Okay. Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Committee of the Whole House having under consideration the bill to be entitled Medical Society Act, I beg leave to report that the committee has gone through the said bill and has agreed to same without amendment. I move that the report of the committee be adopted.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Health, that the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, and 30th be now read.
Shall carry.
Order number 4, an act to amend the Labor Mobility Act, Bill number 40, ordered for third reading. Order number 5, an act to amend the Pharmacy Act, Bill number 39, ordered for third reading. Order number 6, an act to amend the Labor Bill Act, Bill number 43, ordered for third reading. Order number 7, an act to amend the Teacher Superannuation Act, Bill number 45, ordered for third reading. Order number 8, an act to amend the Civil Service Superannuation Act, Bill number 44, ordered for third reading. Order number 9, Forest Fire Protection Act, Bill number 46, ordered for third reading. Order number 10, an act to amend the Highway Traffic Act number 6, Bill number 53, ordered for third reading. Order number 11, an act to amend the Student Financial Assistance Act, Bill number 65, ordered for third reading. Order number 12, an act to amend the Hospitals Act, Bill number 48, ordered for third reading. Order number 13, an act to amend the Financial Administration Act, Bill number 69, ordered for third reading. Order number 14, an act to amend the Municipal Government Act, Bill number 66, ordered for third reading. Order number 15, Films Act Statutes Repeal Act, Bill number 54, ordered for third reading. Order number 16, an act to repeal the Foreign Resident Corporations Act, Bill number 55, ordered for third reading. Order number 17, an act to repeal the Charities Act, Bill number 56, ordered for third reading. Order number 18, an act to amend the Land Protections Act number 3, Bill number 64, ordered for third reading. Order number 19, an act to amend the Insurance Act, Bill number 67, ordered for third reading. Order number 20, an act to amend the Survival of Actions Act, Bill number 68, ordered for third reading. Order number 21, an act to amend the Registry Act, Bill number 60, ordered for third reading. Order number 22, an act to amend the Highway Traffic Act number 5, Bill number 52, ordered for third reading. Order number 23, an act to amend the Regulated Health Professions Act number 2, Bill number 70, ordered for third reading. Order number 25, an act to amend the Sheriff's Act, Bill number 62, ordered for third reading. Order number 26, an act to amend the Education Act number 2, Bill number 72, ordered for third reading. Order number 27, Health and Dental Services Cost Assistance Act, Bill number 73, ordered for third reading. Order number 28, an act to amend the Intimate Images Protection Act, Bill number 73, ordered for third reading. Order number 30, Opioid Damages and Health Care Recovery Act, Bill number 75, ordered for third reading.
The Honorable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honorable Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy, that the said bills be now read a third time.
Shall it carry?
An act to amend the Labor Mobility Act, Bill number 40, read a third time. An act to amend the Pharmacy Act, Bill number 39, read a third time. An act to amend the Labor Act, Bill number 43, read a third time. An act to amend the Teachers Superannuation Act, Bill number 45, read a third time. An act to amend the Civil Service Superannuation Act, Bill number 44, read a third time. Forest Fire Protection Act, Bill number 46, read a third time. An act to amend the Highway Traffic Act, number 6, Bill number 53, read a third time. An act to amend the Student Financial Assistance Act, Bill number 65, read a third time. An act to amend the Hospitals Act, Bill number 48, read a third time. An act to amend the Financial Administration Act, Bill number 69, read a third time. An act to amend the Municipal Government Act, Bill number 66, read a third time. Film Act Statutes Repeal Act, Bill number 54, read a third time. An act to repeal the Foreign Residents Corporation Act, Bill number 55, read a third time. An act to repeal the Charities Act, Bill number 56, read a third time. An act to amend the Lands Protection Act, number 3, Bill number 64, read a third time. An act to amend the Insurance Act, Bill number 67, read a third time. An act to amend the Survival of Actions Act, Bill number 68, read a third time. An act to amend the Registry Act, Bill number 60, read a third time. An act to amend the Highway Traffic Act Number 5, Bill Number 52, read a third time. An act to amend the Regulated Health Professions Act Number 2, Bill Number 70, read a third time. An act to amend the Sheriff's Act, Bill Number 62, read a third time. An act to amend the Education Act Number 2, Bill Number 72, read a third time. Health and Dental Services Cost Assistance Act, Bill Number 73, read a third time. An act to amend the Intimate Images Protection Act, Bill Number 73, Bill Number 74, read a third time. Opioid Damages and Healthcare Recovery Act, Bill Number 75, read a third time.
The honourable member from, or Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy, that the said bills do now pass.
Shall it carry?
Carried.
With amendments? Oh, yeah. Honourable members, these are bills introduced by leave of the House, read a first time, read a second time, committed to the committees of the whole House, reported, agreed to with and without amendments, as the case may be, read a third time, and it is now moved that the bills do now pass. All those in favour say yea. Yea. Contrary? Nay. Honourable members, bills have carried. The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy, that motion 84 be now called.
Shall it carry? Okay, honourable members, that motion is already on the floor, and debate was adjourned by Morel, Dona, and the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I conclude my remarks.
Honourable members, is there any, the honourable member from Summerside, Wilmot, and the opposition whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise in support of this motion. I, along with other members of my caucus, I would say all members of my caucus, have tremendous respect for the work that essential workers have done, particularly during a pandemic. I think that we all remember how we felt in early March when this was unfolding. And none of us really knew what to expect, Mr. Speaker, and that's certainly true for our frontline workers. They had to report for duty going into hospitals and health centers, not having any idea what the outcomes of this were going to be. And that was scary, Mr. Speaker. As the rest of us were going into lockdown and could be safely at home, that was plainly not the case for our essential workers. So I am really pleased to rise in support of this motion. I ran into Dr. Morrison a few weeks ago, and I told her that in the early days of the pandemic, my youngest son, Kingston, felt incredibly comforted by the fact that the person leading the charge on this was a mother. He felt like that was a pretty good indicator of how it would be going, Mr. Speaker, and I thought that was lovely. But I will say, in the last few weeks, months, 8 months now, our view of what an essential worker is has really changed, hasn't it? We talked a lot about healthcare workers as essential workers, and then as we went into lockdown, we realized essential workers are grocery store workers. They are gas station attendants. They are often low-waged workers. They're workers who are in transportation, and they didn't get to go into lockdown either. They had to shoulder the brunt of the risk of the pandemic. They were the ones who still had to turn up every day. And they were also, I will say, Mr. Speaker, the ones who had to shoulder the brunt of public fear. When flour shortages started to present themselves and toilet paper shortages and people were feeling uncomfortable in grocery stores, I am sure we could hear some telling stories from our grocery store workers. So I think that opens a really interesting discussion. So many of us are in agreement that essential workers are in fact essential and we need to celebrate them, and yet we find ourselves in the troubling position that most of them are also low-waged workers. So I'm delighted that government has put forward this motion to appreciate essential workers during a pandemic. And I would like to suggest that if government really wants to appreciate them, they could increase the minimum wage more than 15 cents, Mr. Speaker. There was a report that came out not all of that long ago indicating that $19 an hour is closer to a living wage for someone living in Prince Edward Island. Our support for essential workers is going to put them closer to $13 an hour, Mr. Speaker. And I just feel like there are so many examples in this House where we stand up and affirm our support for something, but don't bother to back it up with any action. I heard the minister responsible for the status of women saying this morning that she wants to ensure the voices of children are heard. I hope that means the minister will be voting in support of our Youth Voting Act. I have heard that we want to support the BIPOC community last night. I have yet to hear a riveting debate on our support for a moderate livelihood fishery, Mr. Speaker. I have yet to hear the Minister of Justice and Public Safety stand up and pledge that he will absolutely denounce violence against our Indigenous people. We had a motion in support of trying to eliminate drunk driving, and we all congratulate ourselves on our individual actions without a discussion on addictions and mental health. We cannot assume that individual action on systemic issues is good enough. So while it's lovely to see government come forward with a motion to support essential workers, I would remind you, government, that you are in the best position to actually support essential workers and increase their wage to a living one. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Water, Climate Change, Minister responsible for the status of women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Minister responsible for the status of women, I feel I need to speak to this motion. And I'd like to speak to it as a mother of young children and a daughter of aging parents, and as an islander who, like everyone here, is dependent on the contributions of essential workers. Dependent not just during the pandemic, but every day. I want to extend my heartfelt appreciation for the incredible dedication of essential workers to the province of Prince Edward Island, especially during this past year that has been so incredibly challenging. As noted in this motion, essential workers bravely went to work each day during the pandemic to ensure others have the supplies, supports, and services islanders needed most. Everyone's lives were challenged during the pandemic and continue to be. But without essential workers, we wouldn't have been able to get through it, and we wouldn't be where we are now. I want to reference the Advisory Council on the Status of Women's report, Gender and COVID-19 in Prince Edward Island, in the words of Women Identifying Islanders, March to July 2020. The report states that women fill the lion's share of roles in some fields deemed essential work, especially work in healthcare, childcare, elder care, and other caregiving, and in food-related roles such as food processing, cooking, and retail food sales. A past chairperson was quoted as saying, "I think women have definitely taken the toll. It doesn't matter where you look. Women are frontline workers." Essential workers are moms and dads. They are daughters, they're caregivers. They have loved ones who they worry about. And they kept going because they knew they needed to, that we needed them to. And for that, we are forever grateful. I heartily support this motion that the Legislative Assembly show appreciation for all essential workers across the province for their dedication, their hard work, and their compassion throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And I would like to extend this to all the days before and after the pandemic. Thank you for all that you do, and I hope that you take the time to take care of yourselves. And if you need support, please reach out. Caregivers also need care. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Winslow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I completely agree to support this motion. I agree with the members who've brought their support through. And I do agree with the member from Summerside Wilmot, who said that at the onset of when the pandemic first hit, we were all, the definition of an essential worker did change quite a bit. Originally, we of course thought it was more in healthcare, and I do think that some of the essential workers that came to light were the moms and dads who helped with the education system, becoming the support teachers for their students. I know my wife who is a school teacher. She found tremendous support from the moms and the dads who stepped up to make sure that their students were continuing on with their education in the best possible way that they could, a lot of it virtual. So I do want to, say thank you to those essential workers who helped out big time. And my hope is that, and this is one thing that my wife and I really try to do as a team, is that from that is to continue on to help students at home. A lot of that was done at home, and it was kind of good because I talked to a few moms and dads who said I had to kind of refresh my memory on grade 8 math or grade 8 geometry, but it was good because it helped me, and as I was learning with my son or my daughter. And so I do want to say that, Mr. Speaker. Also, too, working in an industry of keeping Islanders home, or keeping Islanders warm during the winter months, I do, of course, want to thank all the essential workers that the member, of course, mentioned, in the retail stores and the home delivery of fuel that kept Islanders at least warm during the cold winter months, especially when the pandemic was still in form. So I just do want to say thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the time to speak on this motion.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I too would like to speak to this motion and thank the member for bringing it forward. We learned many things during this crisis, and one of the most important things was that we all need to stick together, and we saw it with our essential workers, whether it was healthcare workers, whether it was truck drivers bringing supplies here, whether it was business owners, store clerks, firefighters, EMS. I could name and name and name, and I'm sure I'm going to miss some, but we all know the importance of all these essential people, and without them we couldn't have got through this. So I want to thank them, and we need to reconsider what we do for those people going forward, whether it's wage increases, as was mentioned here, or different things we can do. But I just want to say I certainly support this motion, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And along the lines of what we've heard here in the Assembly from across and on this side, I wanted to rise and really recognize essential workers. And like the member from Summerside was saying, we often think of essential workers being healthcare workers, but it really expands much beyond that, and so I think it's so important that we recognize that. And as the member across says, we recognize that those folks are often in jobs that are really not high paying, and they have strict hours, many times often shift work, Mr. Speaker, and they need to go, and I mean, we're talking everything from financial services to farmers markets and food banks, discount stores, hardware stores. I mean, if you go to the website and you look at the list of essential services, like officially designated essential services by the CPHO, it's quite incredible, the wide range. And I really think that, as the member has said across, we need to show our appreciation for these workers. Oftentimes, it was very difficult, and I think they were very anxious, and I think about the tough decisions that employers had to make during this. For example, when it comes to the construction industry, I talked to several companies who said, we're not sure whether we should be sending our employees to work, because you have those workers, Mr. Speaker, that were coming in from off island, essential workers that were required to keep moving our island economy forward and essential services, and it was some tough decisions. And I know that there were businesses that intentionally decided to shut down and took a hit, like a real financial hit on their bottom line. They continued to pay their employees, Mr. Speaker, because they chose that they didn't want to go forward. So it was during the height of the pandemic when we were in lockdown. It was a tough time, but the credit goes to those workers who stepped up and really put themselves on the front line of the pandemic to make sure that our island continued to operate. And Mr. Speaker, I really want to thank them. So of course, putting on my education minister hat, Minister of Education, Lifelong Learning, one of the first and the biggest challenges, Mr. Speaker, was making sure that we had, childcare to support these essential workers, Mr. Speaker. And again, we're not talking just, nurses and doctors and that whole slew of healthcare professionals, but Mr. Speaker, with schools shut down, we're talking about childcare during the day for all those people. If you were going in to be a clerk at the local grocery store, you needed someone to look after your children while you were there, and it was very, very challenging because, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if everyone in the Assembly really understands how our early learning and childcare system works on the island, but we rely on third-party businesses to provide that care, and we do support them through different tiers, but they're private businesses, and thank goodness for the department staff in early childhood development in the Department of Early Learning, Education and Lifelong Learning. They work very closely with the Early Childhood Development Association, and between those two sets of people, they have fantastic personal relationships with the private businesses that are providing the child care. And so really, when we said, okay, we need to provide child care for those essential workers, we went out to that sector, the early learning and child care sector, and said, we need you to come and help. We want you to volunteer, to step up, to go into a situation where at that time there were so many unknowns. Like the CPHO was really just learning the basics about COVID and how it works and what it meant. We came up with protocols, and they stepped up and they made sure that our essential workers were supported so they could go to work. And so I just want to acknowledge them, the folks in the Department of Educational and Lifelong Learning in the Division of Early Learning and Childcare, Early Childhood Development, but all of those within the sector. And Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to highlight again what we're talking about here. So this is just licensed childcare in the province, 6,307 children, Mr. Speaker, and that's up from a year ago. And Mr. Speaker, I think I have the stats here. Last year, in the fall of 2019, there were 5,145 children that were served by licensed centers. And this year, in the fall of 2020, there's 6,307. So we're going up almost 1,200 spaces and children that are served by licensed centers. So it's very, very significant, and it's a sector of our economy and a sector of our society that really oftentimes doesn't get the recognition they deserve. And I know I enjoy working with the critic for education from across, the member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park, because I know one of her passions is not just education as an educator herself and counselor, but also really fighting for the status of women. And many times, Mr. Speaker, what we've seen that those folks who are predominantly women working in early learning and childcare are not making the wages that are comparable in other sectors for the very, very valuable work they're doing. And so that's why we are working so hard to correct that, to improve that. We've seen increases to the wage grid for early childhood educators. We've also seen increases for special needs assistants and autism tutors. And it's an area we're going to continue to address. We've committed to multi-year increases in that sector. So I just want to recognize those folks because the work they do is just so valuable. And we're going to continue to support that. So, Mr. Speaker, they went back to look after the children of our essential workers to make that happen. And I want to point out as well, Mr. Speaker, that we did not actually have to, we didn't have to designate these childcare workers back to work. We didn't have to say, you must go back, because that was an option. Those solutions were available. We asked, they answered, and they came out and they provided the support needed. We opened up 22 centers for emergency childcare, Mr. Speaker, and there were many, many folks who also stepped up to provide childcare in home. Of course, that's completely outside of the department, but the community really rallied. And there were up to 120 centers offering this sort of emergency childcare for essential workers as we entered in phase 2 of a new PEI. So if you wanted to not know about the numbers of children that were supportive of essential workers, we're talking about around 918 families, or almost 1,600 children that we had to do. So I just want to thank them again. Now, the other thing, of course, is when you get out of the early...
Thank you. The honourable member, the hour has been called.
I was just going to get into the good work. Our teachers never stop, Mr. Speaker. They never stop.
The honourable member from Morell-Donagh, the government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier, that this House do adjourn until November 24th, Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the PM.
Shall it carry?